Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Monday, April 3rd. We'll call to order at 6:37 p.m. First item of business be the review of meeting minutes from March 13th and March 23rd.
Make a motion to approve our meeting minutes, March 13th, 2023, as written.
Did I miss those? I read the 23rd. I don't see the 13th.
Were they not? I'm not getting mine to come up because I just got an update. So give me a second. No, you are correct. It was only the 23rd.
Yeah, Bill. I didn't see those, Bill.
So we didn't, I don't think they were in there unless they came separately and I missed them.
No.
Okay.
23rd
I'll make a
only.
motion to approve the March 23, 2023 minutes as written.
Second.
Any discussion?
None?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Review of the trench shield and box procurement. Mr. McCray, come up, please. So we had a $25,000 budget from the capital planning for trench box and grave shield. We did a RFQ, sent to 4 vendors. We got 2 responses. One from National Trench Safety, Houston, Texas, for $23,145.60. And another one from American Shoring in Shrewsbury, Mass. for $19,800. Any concerns with the proposals?
No, not at all.
Any questions on them?
I have none.
None.
I make a motion to award the procurement of the trench box and grave shield to American Shoring Incorporated of Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, in the amount of $19,800, and to authorize Brian Smith, Town Administrator, to execute all necessary agreements.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Review and issuance of the 13th water commitment for FY23.
Make a motion to approve the 13th water commitment for FY23 in the amount of $43,472.17 for water use charges.
Second?
Any discussion?
None?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Review of the water main break on River Road procurement. Mr. Sanders, coming up. So we had a water main break on March 25th. It was Saturday, I believe. Which we had to conduct an emergency procurement to excavate and move materials, repair the break, and reconstruct the road base. After the repair, we filed with Mass Division of Capital Management and Maintenance, DCAM, for an emergency procurement authorization to waive the advertising requirements, since the costs are expected to exceed $10,000. So far, the work to date is $45,3097 from Johnson
Correct.
for the material moving and rebuild. The rest of it was all in-house labor and materials. So I spoke with the gentleman from DCAM an hour or so ago, and as part of like bringing it back to original conditions, the estimate for the remaining road base work, the paving, sidewalk, et cetera, is around $7,000, so 7,500, somewhere in there. I think the estimate's a little bit less, but he asked to give a number that was in the ballpark, and it can be included, so I did provide
Oh, it
him that.
can,
It
okay.
can, because it's a choice, but generally it's, I shouldn't say it's a choice. Generally, it's considered, back to original conditions is all part of the emergency
Got it.
repair, so it can be within the scope, so I did offer that and update him on that amount and what it was for, so we should hear pretty soon. It sounded like it'd be pretty quick after
I was
this.
gonna say, did he give a timeline?
I didn't actually ask him for one, but this was his last question. There's been some back and forth over the last week on it, but this was the last one I believe that he had to finalize whatever their review process is and get that going, so it didn't sound like it was going to be a long time.
The estimate, I'm assuming, was from Johnson to finish off the job.
That is correct. And unless you have any concerns knowing it can be part of the emergency request, I would
Nope,
say we
let's
go
just
ahead
get it
and
done.
just get it done, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So, I'll say it to Glenn, but I think he's coordinating with Johnson for the work, right, for the road work?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. You want to move forward, and then we'll clear it up after in terms of the procurement process with the emergency.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think there's one other piece to this, and just want to look real quick here. Any questions around this or anything, or the incident?
So I have a question of Glenn as well. This is the second break to that area, and it isn't the second? I thought
It
was
is
the
not. I
second.
did a little research on some
Okay.
history on River Road, and in the last 25 years roughly, there's been a total of 4.
4 breaks?
This being the fourth.
All
Or
of-
where? So we have the
So-
two recent, right?
Right. Supposedly there was one right near where we just had one, and then there was another one further down, and then there was one where it starts to go up the hill. If you're heading towards Pratt Street, you know, there's that incline, and there was one up there.
In addition to the two we just had?
Yes.
So there's 4 plus 2?
No, 4
4
total
total.
4 total, okay.
in the past 25 years roughly.
Okay, I gotcha.
So my question is should we be concerned?
I would, there was talk, I was talking to Brian, as far as like in the future, if we're doing a project, that would be, Glenn, if we're paving that at some point, or the sidewalks, to maybe think about it. I don't know if it's a ground shift or, I mean, when we excavated this out for this past one, it was just like the previous one. When the line was put in before, it was literally backfilled with, there's huge broken pieces of asphalt in there, large rocks that are, you
So it
know,
wasn't backfilled with just sand?
no,
It's like, well, I don't know if it's technically dirty fill, but that's what I'd call it.
Yeah.
dirty fill, yeah.
Is this all the same section? Like all 4 breaks are on the same kind of line,
Yes,
the same feed? Yeah, okay. I'm where you are. I had the same concerns about, it seems to be a pattern. I didn't think it was
Right,
4. I thought
right.
it was 2
Well, I
in a
didn't think it
year.
was
I
four
thought it
either.
was
I thought
2,
it
and I
was 2.
spoke with the last, past water superintendent to try to get history of it, and we came up with the count of 2, we just have 2 other ones, so total of 4. It could be a climate thing with the less snow and more rain penetrating the ground, maybe things are settling different or shifting, more flexing in the pipe.
Does that line feed more or less? I mean, then it's obviously not a line that goes up to the tank and back.
No, it isn't, but the way that the water system is, everything's kind of looped. So there's always a constant flow through there. I mean, when the well pump house comes on to fill the tank, it goes through various different lines to get up there. There is one main trunk line, but it flows through all the other branches.
How far does that branch, where does that branch go from River? Does it go all the way around and down Pratt or,
Yes.
and keep going? Or
Yes.
is there another one on 63?
There is the one, it's just one main one that goes down River Road, goes down Pratt. It comes over from West High also, and it loops, on Gun Street, it's a dead end, and then it goes down to the hill. A lot of it's connected. There's only a couple dead ends in town, and really none of them, except for Gun Street, is in that. That's the closest.
I mean,
I don't know.
so I mean, I hear the concern, but that's a costly
Huge costly.
replacement, and even if you add in some in-kind services and police details for the days that the day that they were there, and just add in the whole cost, you're between 15 and 20. I don't know what the if you
Right.
did in-kind services, what that would actually be, because we're about 12 with out of pocket to
Just
a vendor.
Yeah, just for one spot.
Just for one spot.
Right.
But, so even if that were to happen once a year, that's 20 grand a year, as opposed to, I would even,
Yeah,
$1 million,
yeah,
$1.5 million to replace it. I'm not sure, while I get the sentiment that if this keeps happening, it's costly and we shouldn't keep repairing a broken pipe, I also don't know if we're ready to look at, we've had 2 breaks, let's replace $1.5 million worth of piping. So just, there's a lot of cost with that.
there is.
I had the same initial thought too. I was like, oh, if this is going to keep happening, well, let's not,
Yeah.
let's just replace it. But I'm not sure that's financially the responsible thing to do right now. I'm not sure if there's, other things we can do. I don't know if you can, we can discuss that going forward about a long-term plan,
Obviously, if we're looking at a road project in that neighborhood or on that road, then we'd want to be looking at what this looks like while we're there.
Yes.
Because we don't want to pull it up again.
Correct.
and,
If
Right.
it's going to get done.
economy is there
yeah.
then, right?
Yeah.
But
The past 2 have been right between the edge of the sidewalk and the edge of the road, and that, there's like a 2 to 3 foot wide grass belt section, and it's been straight in line with that, the past 2 that we had, so,
but they all go right that. It's the whole. It's most of the way, right?
correct.
Okay.
Is it possible to get an estimate on the cost, potential cost?
I could ask around.
Including
see-
paving?
Yeah, I could get an idea,
Okay.
roughly.
I mean, for a finite cost, you'd be looking at engineered services. I
Right.
wouldn't go that. But if somebody's done a similar stretch of, a run the same length in the last year, see what it costs them.
Okay,
I wouldn't put too much time in trying to get an accurate or a drilled down number. But if there's a ballpark, plus or minus several $100,000. I'm gonna call on Glenn just because I know you're typing away.
Yeah, please do.
What do you got?
The other problem with that, this water main runs right by the catch basins also.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're leaching catch basins, so they're open bottom ones. This one was probably less than a foot away from the base of that. So that's gonna have to be a consideration
Yep.
also, that all the drainage is gonna have to be involved on that side of the road and the sidewalk also, because it runs under the sidewalk basically. So it's not just digging in a grass belt, replacing a water main.
right.
There's drainage and sidewalk involved also along the edge of the road. Just to throw a few more zeros on here.
So
Great.
what I'm hearing is we've got to have a few more breaks in close proximity before we to each other before we want to look at
Yeah.
that as a holistic repair.
I mean, I don't want to
potentially.
spend $20,000 every time it breaks, but I also don't want to preemptively say it's time to go spend several $1 million on something that even if it broke once a year for the next 5 years, that's $100,000. I'm just saying financially,
Right,
over the next 5 years, we spend $100,000 to do a couple of repairs versus let's sign ourselves up for the next 20 years for, a bond so that we can replace it. I'm not sure. I'm not there yet.
20,000 a year is not that ROI.
No, it's a pain.
doesn't make the
They
pain.
always happen, on a weekend or at 2:00 in the morning. So, you know,
Right.
it's not the opportune times
course.
to do it, but yeah, I'm not there for full replacement yet.
Other questions on that specifically?
No.
No.
I do have one more question.
Yeah.
I know you asked him to move forward with it. Do we need final authorization from DCAM first before we get them out here? No, okay.
I mean, it's an emergency work, you can do it.
So he's already
without-
said it's authorized, just do it. And
Well, he didn't say either way, but we've been doing the work. It was more of the whole of the emergency.
Got it.
To get back to
Got it.
original conditions is considered the emergency,
Yep,
if you wish it to. So unless you both feel differently and want to wait for a decision, which I don't think.
no.
Either
no.
way, it's got to get done.
He's already
At the end
indicated
of the day,
that,
it's got to get done.
that it falls into that category where it's
Yeah.
approved. I just didn't want it to, I didn't know if he said, yes, it's approved, but I just need
No.
final, you need to wait to hear back from me now.
No,
But-
his only reference to that was, specifically, it's a roadway. Yes, it's passable, but it's not as safe. So, in terms of the bar, right, to say
Right.
it's not to the same safety level it was, so you can still consider that as holistically as part of the emergency repair part of it. Realistically, had we known that clearly last week, it might already be done, or it would be in process probably, if they were available.
Yeah,
So-
the local plant's open today for asphalt.
Right.
Right. So, knowing the situation, it could have been today. Had potentially. I'm not sure, but it would have happened. So, there was no recommendation to wait for a decision
Okay.
in terms of the request. There is a second waiver requirement, and I'm going to defer that to next week. It's ours to waive, and I believe it's related to the bidding requirement. I believe we have there's an advertising and a bidding, and I believe DCAM can waive one, we can waive the other.
Okay,
And I just want to clarify what that is before we do anything.
got it.
But assuming you wouldn't have any concerns with either, then I think we're good with the process we're following.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else?
No,
No?
Okay.
thank you.
Hopefully we'll have a determination and wrap up what needs to get done on that side next week. Surplus equipment request, Recreation Department, first read.
I have no concerns.
And that's for a
There's a
DVD
bunch.
player.
Yeah, there's a
Blu-ray,
bunch of them.
Home theater system. I think it's all in one. Or you mean
Yeah,
requests?
there's,
Oh,
there's
each of
various
the- each of
requests,
the-
yeah.
each of
There's
them,
the home
yeah.
theater system, there is a
Two of those?
projector, a second home theater system, surround sound equipment and screen for showing movies, a foosball and a ping pong table, and then an old school printer.
Thank you for saving me from reading them all.
Yep. Oh, and there's one more, the phone and the answering machine system. I know we'll do several reads on these, but I would just say that maybe that's something that we could put in the open up to residents to
Oh yeah, do like a
do like a silent bid on it or
yeah,
something.
Yeah, we've done
You know,
those before.
They range in value between $100 and $200, and I'm sure somebody would love to have some of those things at their house
Absolutely.
for personal use.
You gonna offer block party movies soon?
Not me. No. No. Somebody, not me.
Okay. Any concerns from you? No.
No.
Other than that recommendation.
Nope, no concerns.
All right. And we'll carry for next time. Mm-hmm. Insurance Advisory Committee appointment.
I make a motion to appoint James Loyne as the retiree representative to the Insurance Advisory Committee.
I will second that.
Any Questions or concerns?
None.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. We'll stop in and see Betsy during the week or when you get a chance to get sworn in. Please. Thank you. Okay. I think
That's all you
I
have
managed
before.
to get through all the before.
Yeah,
Before?
you did. And we still have a few minutes before 7.
Yeah, couple. Excellent. I think that was it. Did you guys have anything else or anything for next week while we're here talking through it?
No, I think anything for next week is going to be contingent on where we get this week. That's the bulk
Understood.
of it.
Okay. All right, we got about 2 minutes till we get started. Actually, I'm gonna go off mic for a second. While we wait, there's a bunch of stuff to actually hand out that isn't prepped and I didn't get there yet. So
Oh, okay.
it's not just this.
Yeah, but I wasn't sure why those were there.
Just because they're normally in the packet of materials for the night, even though we don't need to sign them yet.
Right, not till we.
Not till you. That's the agenda copy.
Of course you had those. You know, we just approved these, might as well throw a signature on it.
Don't mind. It's gonna probably continue. I should probably just do all of them. So none of you want this, so you should just fit on.
Yeah, we have it all electronically.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yep. Two different ones. Okay. Oh, those are just the set that I saved for you. Here's another set. Were you actually splitting them up? Were you
I
separating?
was, but yes,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, so that's a split pile and then those are two
Okay.
separate. And I got one more
I
here.
think everyone has enough actually.
I don't know how
Or are
many
these
more
the
I have.
same?
They are different, isn't it? There's a concept. It's the fourth line down from the top.
Yeah,
I think you have 3 and 4, and that's 1 and 2. I just handed you.
okay.
Right,
Oh, guys, I
Right
see.
up here, I think
3 and
this is
4.
1
Yep,
and 2.
1. Yep.
Is this a stack?
Yes, yep. Okay. So do you have this one then? This concept 1? Okay.
By the way,
Um,
you're supposed to say happy birthday.
Thank you.
You would pass those down.
Is
Yes, yeah. I need another one.
Need another one?
Yeah, I only had,
I have another set.
okay, I'll probably should just get the full set.
I have it, this is a full set.
Okay.
Well, that's 1, 2, and the other.
Okay, cause I was
Does he have
missing.
3 and 4?
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
2 threes.
You have 2 threes?
Yeah, I have, oh no, they're different.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all different.
Oh, concept 3, okay.
Should be right above the revised date.
Do you want this set? This is 1
Sure,
and 2.
why not?
Are you,
I know.
Ben or Dan might be short 1, if you have an extra.
Let's move it upstairs.
Yeah, it's 4,
Maybe it's.
4.
You have all 4?
No, it's
You
this one.
just need this one?
Yeah.
Where did that get from? We'll leave that as extras.
Okay.
And I think this is the set. And then this is the last one, and I'll start doing this.
This kid, man.
There you are. Each of the 3, right?
I don't know if he's coming.
Why didn't you print this one
I
out?
hope he's coming. We have a quorum.
I'll send him a text, see if he's coming. This number here, the number
42 pages.
3244. Yeah, which I believe correlates to these. But I don't think it correlates to what we have.
They wrote me and said, are you okay? Did I not look okay?
Unless it was prioritized. Anyway, enough of that. Okay, thank you for your patience. So, we'll start with review of FY24 budget requests and projected revenue. We have a quorum? No, we do not. Of finance, right? We're short 1
Until Ben,
until Ben. Yep, okay. Do we know of anybody talk to him or no?
I just saw the text, asked if he's coming.
Okay, all right.
Oh, just came in.
There he is.
Okay.
He's
well, then
coming.
We will wait another couple moments. All good. Or maybe a couple and then a couple.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just sent you a text. You're not sure.
Welcome. All right, now we'll get going. So first, we'll cover review of the FY24 budget requests and projected revenue. This is we have the updated recap sheet from, or summary sheet from our last discussions. Incorporates, I believe, everything that we discussed last time. Any questions or concerns at this point for the moment?
Other than the fact that we're not balanced?
Yeah, no, I think last time we were saying we're waiting to, well, not waiting, but what would balance that right now is if the school committee, when they meet, has this week, talks about the circuit breaker allocation next year, and if they choose to use that to offset some of the budget requests, that would bring us closer to 0. It still may not be 0, but it'll be a lot closer. So we're waiting to kind of zero that out for our next meeting, which will be our final budget meeting. We need to set it next week to make the timeline for the meeting. So we should probably talk contingencies though,
Correct.
or at least be thinking about them and be ready with them for next meeting if we need to.
Am I correct to read this? That currently, we're about 84,000 out of balance,
Correct.
and we're hoping the school will make up some of that with circuit break, we hope, or don't know?
We hope, we don't know, they're gonna meet on it, they're scheduled this week, I don't recall what day. It might be tomorrow, might be Thursday, might be what, I don't, this week, they have a meeting scheduled. So we'll have that, we'll have an update on whether they choose to do anything with that for Monday, for next
Okay.
Monday. And I think the estimate at the time, and that's part of what they were waiting on, is the hard numbers, was it 65 to 85, somewhere in there, so.
So between now and next Monday, so we're not doing it next Monday night, is there a plan for the administrator or somebody to work out some potential thoughts on where we might get this 84,000 from, or however much is left that the school can't or doesn't do? Or is the plan to sit here on Monday night and try to figure it out?
I would say we either come up with some ideas tonight or we bring them for Monday night
Okay.
and what we think would be cut. I mean, we've had all the proposals from everyone at this point, you know, I mean, that's my take. We've had every department look at it and everyone propose what they felt was possible and we accepted, I mean, most of them. I don't think there's much that we reversed. And then it's just a decision. I think last week, if I recall, there was some conversation about if it's 10,000, we probably just source it and move on. You know, I mean, out of free cash, and we're close enough. I think that was what I got out of our conversation last time. Is we're trying to get to a balanced operating budget out of raise and appropriate that includes all the needs and sustainability. But there's some point where,
Yeah.
to me, and I think that's what I heard, that the number's small enough that if we're spending $10,000 to become balanced on our operating cost versus our raise and appropriate capacity, that's not the significant issue that we started with, and not as concerning, I think,
Correct.
to most. But please speak up if you feel differently.
No, I'm fine, I just.
Okay. Yeah.
Questioning the process. We have one order of business. I had an email from our finance committee chair that should not be here tonight. And asked that we might appoint a temporary chair. And I would nominate Charlie if you'd be interested. And
I would not accept that.
a good experience, Charlie. Good on your resume.
Or leave it off, maybe. Depends on the audience.
You sure?
I'd rather not have that.
Well, how about Ben?
I'll do it.
Ben?
Sure, sure.
So I nominate Ben? A
I'll
second?
that.
All in favor?
I bet you will.
All right, thank you.
Did I have a
those in
vote?
favor?
I got one vote.
Yeah.
Was it all in favor?
We're in
Did
favor.
I?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Condolences.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. So the process is ours to define here, you know, the end of your question there. That's what I heard last time. That's the outstanding, significant piece that moves the 85 right now that I know of, which we won't know until later this week. Once we hear what that is, I mean, we can obviously share that with the group. The other thing would just be going back through and is everything, you know, that we think should be in there. We're going to talk about wages here in a minute. Is that number the right number to hold? And if it's not, then that changes that 85.
I guess I just asked them, it sounds like 10 is small enough to not worry about, but 80 isn't, so what's the threshold?
That was my take from last meeting. I don't think we formally said yet.
Okay.
We should make a decision, or at some point, we're gonna either cut a budget, or something that's coming out of raise and appropriate, or we're going to decide the number's small enough that we are comfortable with accepting that much is funded out of raise and appropriate. I think that's the ultimate bottom line here, right?
Okay. Could I ask
No,
if,
yeah, okay.
if the number comes in and it does not appear from the school, if it doesn't appear to adequately deal with this 84,000, if you'd let the chair of the finance committee know if we need to call another meeting to come up with some suggestions, if there's time to post one before next Monday. If between the time you find out and next Monday, we could post another meeting to sit around and talk about it with the finance committee, or as finance committee.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's it.
Did you look up when it was? Is that, or no?
No.
Okay,
No,
thought
I
you
was
were-
looking at something else.
That's fine, I'll check now.
It's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday? Thank you. So,
You'd have to,
wait, we wouldn't unless it was just earlier Monday.
yeah, if you wanted to have one earlier in the day on Monday, that's the only way you'd be able to post it in time.
Okay.
Or later on Wednesday following whenever that meeting ends, if you want to post it right away
Okay.
for Friday.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jim?
Just like to make a suggestion or propose for consideration that if the number doesn't come back at something that could be covered by free cash, that whatever shortfall has to be made up would be taken from whichever department doesn't show up.
Heard.
It just seems that there are several departments that have worked very hard to come in, and others have been less than willing to work with the town.
Understood. I think maybe just to ensure it's clear, there's capacity in the free cash to cover it. It's kind of what got us not totally started down this path because we had a deficit no matter what when we started, but the idea that we wanted a sustainable budget, not just to cover it for this year, just for everyone to know. So there is some free cash capacity that exceeds that, but that doesn't help us next year if that's not there, the following fiscal year. So it's kind of balancing those. And I don't know, I think Ben, your question was great. What is that threshold? That's the conversation, right? That's a big part of it. That's why we're here.
The other question I have, and the treasurer's not here, but the question of, at the last school committee vote, they voted to reduce the personnel line item, the staffing line item for wages, which may result in reduction in force, or it could be reduction in hours per every staff member. So there's a combination, but if it results in a reduction in force, conversely, would we be able to reduce the benefits line item? Because we have to allocate something for every employee, should they opt into it. We can't be stuck without being able to offer them benefits. But if we are having a reduction in force, we should be able to conversely reduce that line item by one plan, two plans, whatever that ends up being. And those are roughly 20 to
I think
20
we
to
budget 20.
20,000 per. So if there's even just one person that is a reduction in force, that's an additional 20,000 that could come off of the benefits line, which is a huge line. But you have to have,
Yeah, capacity. And there has to be some capacity for fluctuation and change.
correct,
which is
for
built
somebody
in,
that,
but
from single plan, from no plan to family plan. I mean, it could change during open enrollment every year.
that was one I forgot last week as well because I thought the same.
Yep.
I mean, we don't want to presume and hope that we don't have people who have to lose their jobs, but it is a wage cut. It could
Right.
result. And if it does, each one could be, in theory, another 20 we could
Right.
budget down.
And for budget setting purposes, that's going to be very difficult. And I say this because they will not make those determinations by next week. Those determinations by right won't be made until, I think their contract says something in June or something like that. Before the end of the school year, there has to be a notification if there's a reduction
Got it.
in force. So
So there won't even be a
there won't be a
guesstimate that there may be,
There
and it
won't be
may
a
be
known-
with this much because
Correct.
that's not, that's not
Yeah,
within
they
the
have to
scope
follow.
of
They have to follow
CBA.
their contractual obligations of when they have to notify. That's not to say they wouldn't make it sooner, but they're still in the middle of the school year, I wouldn't imagine, or tail end of the school year, I wouldn't imagine they'd be making those notifications now. They follow the contract.
I didn't get, I'm not sure exactly what it was. I remember there was some comments about that in one of the last school committee meetings, and my recollection is I got the feeling it was much later,
Yeah.
much closer to June than now. Jackie, you come up if you want. If you have a question?
Well, I just, in response to your question, I believe at the couple school committee meetings I've attended, they said that they had to notify the staff that they had the potential not to be renewed by April 15th. Because I had asked the question, when was the deadline, when you would have to notify that, and the superintendent said it was April 15th.
Okay, I was thinking May. But
I did too, which is why I was
Thank you for that
surprised when she said that.
clarification.
Thank you. So being that still that answer doesn't have to or may not be
Ready for next
ready
week.
for Monday, are you suggesting that we hedge something there potentially if needed? That's another way to hedge that maybe it's still balanced without.
Well, I think, it's one of those things where if we get it close and we're, let's say 20,000 off, and it means that we can reduce on RNA out of the benefits for one line item of $20,000. If we still hold that free cash in case our assumption was incorrect, or things have changed and that plan no longer comes to fruition, and we still need to put that back for a one-time, we could backfill with free cash. But we balance it on RNA end and know that if something goes different than what we're seeing play out, then we do a one-time backfill. And I wouldn't do that for 80,000, but if you're 10, 15, 20,000, I'd look at that line first. I didn't look year over year
How much we've spent there?
how much we've spent out of,
That's a good question. But yeah,
and I know it's one of those lines that even if we don't spend it year over year, you have to allocate enough to allow for
full capacity.
full capacity.
Right.
So it's unfortunate.
But it's a hedge again. If you're hedging that maybe there's a reduction, that means the count is different. There's the capacity to allow for fluctuation during the year that we build in may not be as negotiable, but if you assume there's a change in numbers, then that's a direct change. You can hedge that just like hedge if we're not spending it all, that there is more capacity there than we think, right?
Correct.
But other thoughts on the 85 if we're not there? No? Okay. Anything else of the items on there right now for discussion or concern? As far as I recall, all the other open items, other than determining if the 60 is the right number we need to hold for wage, had been resolved and incorporated last meeting.
Yes.
So I don't know of any other open items there. So if there's nothing else on that, we can take a look at the compensation piece. If you're ready. There's a detailed memo that was provided. I will just touch on a few points, and then Scott, if you want to say anything, knowing you worked on it,
Yep.
To get it ready, please do, and then we can open up for general discussion. Just to note a few things, anyone salaried obviously is under a salary contract. Contract is separate, so won't be part of this numbers or these discussions. Same with the collective bargaining agreement for example, for the police department, New England Police Benevolent Association, Local 121. And we also have a petition to seek recognition for a bargaining unit from AFSCME Council 93 for wastewater and water employees, so they will not be discussed either because no changes can be made during the period of forming through collective bargaining. So there'll be no changes made to any of the wastewater employees, and they're not included in this assessment. That will be handled during the collective bargaining process. So just to understand why those aren't here and we're not discussing those. I believe those are just the kind of the housekeeping pieces. Was there a question? Sorry.
We were looking for the paper version of it.
I don't, it may not have gotten printed in the past. If it wasn't, I didn't hand it to you, so it's not printed. I can print copies if you want.
You'll print copies?
I can print copies if you want to.
Sure.
If you don't mind.
No,
From there, I think I
I'll
hit some of the
put a few
just
things out there.
exclusion points.
So there is, some other disclaimers. Jake talked about the departments that were not part of this discussion because of the contracts in place. The information that we requested was from all over the area, and we're talking about Athol, Deerfield, Leverett, Montague, Northfield, Orange, Shelburne, fire districts within Turners Falls, Shelburne, South Deerfield. So it was a wide range. Orange did not respond back. They were the only ones that didn't participate in providing detailed ranges. Everybody else did in some way, shape, or form. But the disclaimer is that not everybody utilizes the same step and grade or even a step and grade. And so sometimes it's comparing apples to oranges, and it doesn't quite fit in a neat chart. So we had to really take whatever information people were willing to give and share and whatever we could get off of websites. And this was several weeks, a couple months even, of digging and trying to get all of this to put together a package. That package includes, if they have a range, what is their minimum starting pay? What is their top out? If they have a range of pay, and also a benefits package. What are the other towns paying versus what are we paying in town? So none of it was standardized. We did the best we could to put that all in place. I'm just going to run down a couple of things that we found. So overwhelmingly, we found that a majority of our departments are, we looked at averages. There'll always be outliers. We'll always have, a town that may be higher, a town that may be lower. But averages, we were in the ballpark of the range. For most departments, we were higher. There was a few that we were lower. It didn't make sense for us to hold up any sort of base wage adjustments while we tried to fine tune those. So we had sort of made the recommendation that it was myself, Deb from the Finance Committee, and Brian. We would like to further look at those and continue this discussion into FY24 and see if there was a couple that we red flagged that said this doesn't make sense. And I don't know if it was skewed because we only had 2 other numbers to reference, and were those adequate references to say that we were not, in line with the community when we only had 2 other points of documentation to review from. When you only have 3 points total, it's really hard to say that it's a great representation of the neighboring community. So we wanted to dig into some of these a little bit further, but our recommendation was that we were not going to make any wholesale changes to the compensation tables that we had. Any changes that we would make would be strictly in line with discussing, formerly known as COLA, but base wage increases if we were to go there. But just some of the other information that we found, everybody talks about benefits. Erving pays 84, employee pays 16. Just quickly running down through, you see 70% from the town, 65, 75 from the town. Montague pays 80. They're one of the only 2 in the 80s. Northfield at 75, Shelburne at 75, Turners Falls at 80. So that has a financial impact. And we also looked at personal days, vacation time, sick time, bereavement time, all of those to see where we were. We're comparable for most of those, but we were definitely higher on the insurance piece, which has a substantial financial impact. To if that was a 70% coverage like some of the towns, that would far exceed an increase in cost than any COLA would cover. So just to put that into perspective. So where we're at now is we're looking at base wage increases and what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, what can we afford, is the $60,000 placeholder enough, is it not enough? So you're seeing the document that was sent to us. He didn't mark any of these, but there are a few that were red flagged that when you're looking at the minimum average being too low, which means we're not able to attract new employees. If our starting steps are too low, then it's difficult to get people to want to come in, especially if we're going to start them at steps 1, 2, or 3, versus the maximum. And fire, for one, I'll just speak. So we're down a little bit on the starting, and we had insufficient data to even do a maximum because of the way most other areas work. They work with fire districts, it's multiple. They don't have scales, they have just a wage that's worked into a contract that just gives an annual dollar amount. It doesn't talk about steps, it doesn't talk about increases. It's just a flat salary based on their role. So we're trying to work through some of those things, and that's what we want to do over the next 6 months or so into FY24 to make sure that we can come back with any recommendations if there should be a change. Going forward, this depth of a look back on the compensation study, 3 years is too soon. I think the idea in the personnel bylaw was 5 years. Every 5 years to do something similar and continue to look at that. I wouldn't even be opposed. I was the one that said to put it down to 5 from 10, but 5 or 7. 10's a long time it's a long stretch without reviewing it. But every 5 years, that's the plan, to do the same thing. We'll continue with this study, but again, the recommendation that we had out of the 3 of us to all of you is to not make any sweeping changes. When I say sweeping changes, it's do we have a unilateral idea that a position in any department unilaterally makes sense in this grade, or has the job description shifted so much over the years that it no longer makes sense to be in this grade? It became either a lesser job or a higher grade job based on the roles that job does. For most of those, we felt we were comfortable where ours were. There were a couple that we had to red flag, saying there's not enough information to make that recommendation one way or the other, and that's why we want to continue on that a little bit more before we finalize that out and close the book on that for this 5-year period. So
3.
for this 3 year,
For the
going
next-
forward, it'll
I
be
gotcha.
5.
Yep.
So that's all I have. If there's questions, I'll do my best.
I think I heard, as I was coming back there, just that I think the recommendation, what it was, what you just said, what it wasn't, what it is to do more of an overall adjustment to the whole table.
Correct, it's just base wage,
some way,
base
and then
wage,
apply it
whatever
across
it
the
is,
table.
yeah. Okay, and we'll apply it to all, rather than this one particular position was off, so let's change
sure.
just that one. We're just gonna say, we'll still look at that, because there might be some that are off, and we may have to adjust those in the future. But right now, we're comfortable where they're at, so it's just a wholesale across all eligible positions to take a base wage increase.
And you mentioned some of the difficulties and comparisons during the work.
Yes.
Just like specific to fire, I know there was a lot there, is what I heard, a lot of difficulty, and is part of it just because we don't have a 24/7 where maybe they're working days in a row?
So
And
there-
and
yeah,
that
there's-
whole differences between the way we have it modeled currently and most others. They're
So a
either
lot
call
of
or
your,
they're
yeah, a lot of
full-time.
your larger districts are one of two things. They're either a full voluntary or on-call department, or they are a larger 24-hour, 7-day-a-week department that has very strange rotations. You can do, and I say strange, but there's ways you can work with 12-hour shifts, working over a 28-day period. It allows them to work more hours, up to 42 hours, without having to compensate for overtime. There's a lot of those, and these are all contractual things that fall under MGL and DLR that they're all embedded into contracts. And these are not individual municipalities. These are districts that work within their own district, and they have their own guidelines. So it made it really difficult to try and compare what we're doing in our town to what everybody else is doing. There is nobody else that has a full-time yet minimal staffing
5 day a week.
5-day.
day
There's
shift,
just
yeah.
doesn't compare. That model's not out there, so it made it difficult. We're gonna. Brian had some more ideas about some other departments that had not responded with the full ask of information, and to see if we could sort of tease that out a little bit more. That was one of the departments we wanted to flesh out a little bit more.
And I ask only because I think the data looks like it's off, but I think
It is, yeah.
it's also that the data doesn't necessarily correlate to the structure of the department that we have in Erving,
Correct.
because I think that's primarily based on non-call, because we do have full-time staff, but we don't have the 24/7, which is where most of the data came from.
Yep.
So it's not saying it is or isn't, it just makes it apples and grapefruit. So,
In my experience, doing this for a number of years, it's more like fruit salad than just apples and oranges. It's almost impossible to make a comparison. You just do the best you can. I certainly can't speak for all or even any employee, but it would seem to me that it's kind of comforting to know the town is periodically looking at this stuff in a serious way, trying to be as fair as we can. And the taxpayers too know that we're looking at it, trying to be fair all around. I think you're doing a fantastic job of trying to accomplish that, and thank you, because I know it's frustrating. But if I understood right, will you call it base wage overall or cost of living allowance, COLA? Same thing. I'm thinking that's perhaps more of a concern just to the average employee of, with inflation what it is. They claim 8%, but it must be the new math, because every time I go to the grocery store, nothing's gone up 8%. Nor, I'm not suggesting we give everybody 8% raise, but in today's times, I think employees are more concerned with what's it costing me today, and what can the town do so that I don't feel like I'm going backwards instead of forwards. And I don't know if you have thoughts on that yet or not.
I don't know if Scott does, but my thoughts coming into tonight are two. One, I think that's for us to contemplate and come up with what that would be, if that's the recommendation, if that's what we want to do, and that's probably not something that happens in one night. I don't think this happens in one night. There's a lot here, and it's important that we take the right amount of time to decide on what is the right application and numbers. But the second part of that is, if not tonight, then next Monday, coming up with what is the number that we want to hold based on the strategy we think we might employ, because we have until June to decide. It shouldn't take that long, but we have until June 30 to decide. But we have until Monday to put some money aside that's built into our raise and appropriate operating plan. And this is a recurring cost that doesn't go away, so we need to be able to be sure we're funding it properly and able to year after year. So that's my ask, is just that we get to there by next Monday. If I don't think we'll maybe we'll decide the 60 that's in there is the right number and leave it at that and we're good tonight. I don't know. I don't think so. I think we're going to need to think about it and come back and then with the other data points we'll have next Monday, decide from there. But
Yeah.
that's my ask. Now, whether there's a recommendation from
So,
the team.
you know, looking, yeah, I'll just
individual.
throw it out there. So we've thrown the number out before. Brian did some research, not research, but just due diligence and looking at salaries across all affected personnel on the town side that would be affected by a COLA. And for the town, we run the aggregates just around 2.1 million. So just doing math, for every 1% change, you're about 21,000 across the board to the budget. So the earmark of 60 allows for the potential of a range of, you know, between 1 and 3%. That would be the earmark that we have right now. So I think, you know,
That would be in the first year?
yeah, we're only talking single year. We don't do multi-year. Contracts do multi-years, but
That's something we probably need to think about even, but not 5 years from now. But in that, what is the sustainability? Do we have any other adjustment in the tables built in or not? But I don't think we have that
yeah.
yet.
I
Right,
mean,
year
so
over
there's,
year.
you know, there's other things that, and this is where we get to talk about it. So there's other ideas of, if it's not COLA, what else could it be? And we talked about the differences between steps. Currently, when the town created the step and grade system, each step is 2%.
Correct.
In between from 1 through 15. And that's, I don't want to say it's typical, but you can find 2% in a lot of different municipalities. Here in town, we also have the school. Their steps are 3% in between each one. And you can also find municipalities that have 3%. So it doesn't really change how we get there. It's whether or not we want to put it all on, do we want long-term and do more step increase and change the table in that manner? You know, throw in 0.5% and make it, you know, for one fiscal year, make it everything adjust by 2.5 instead of 2. That'll change the table. People will see that same 0.5% increase, and then on top of that, add a COLA. So there's some combination that we need to, you know, talk about on how we get there to what our final dollar amount is. While being cognizant of the fact that we're still, with the earmarked of 60,000, we're still at a negative 84,000 from balance.
Right.
So, and when we're talking wages, that is absolutely ongoing raise and appropriation funding. So backfilling that, saying that we can go more and backfill it with free cash, I would vote against that every time, because FY24 will be back out here saying we don't have the funds to pay our people. So that's the dilemma. That's the conundrum that we're in right now. So
And I think there was some flat rate discussion too. We could do just
So-
a flat dollar amount across the table.
There
Well,
is-
across the starting steps.
so due to the fact that he's unable to be here, Deb's unable to be here, we
Yeah,
didn't
not,
have.
not Scott's opinion, just
It's
things
not my
that were
opinion. Somebody had
contemplated,
thrown an email saying, at least part of the conversation, and I have not had enough time. I literally got this information earlier today. Have not had time to really dive into it, nor have any conversations with anybody else about it. But the idea of, rather than a percentage applied to each step, figuring out if there's just a flat increase for everybody, and adjust the table by a flat increase. And there's a lot of pros and cons to that, and I don't know where people are, and I don't think we have to get into that deep tonight. But the idea of, if you just did 1%, somebody at step 1, their raise is a lot smaller than somebody at step 15 that also gets 1%. And where if you just turn around and say, we're going to find a happy medium, find a dollar amount that if we were to raise everybody's, you raise the entire table by that flat dollar amount rather than just a percentage. So you're not seeing the top grow more than the bottom. You see everybody grow together at the same rate. Just to put it into perspective, when we're not talking about percentages, a $1 raise is about just shy of $62,000. So if you want to put that into perspective, we earmarked 60. So just a $1 raise. And those are just numbers based on how many employees do we have, averaging out on, 40 hours a week, 28 hours a week for some. You figure out how many hours we have, multiply that by 1. That's what the cost is.
No matter the grade, too. You said
matter the
step,
grade, no
steps
matter-
don't- Everybody gets the same.
Everybody would get the
regardless of step or
same,
grade.
so just to put numbers, we talk about what it costs for 1%, we talk about what it costs for $1, just so people have a comparison of what we're discussing when we talk about those things.
I've advocated for a long time for that flat rate, because if you make $35,000 or you make $135,000, when you walk in to buy a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk, it costs you the same. And if you give everybody $1, it's increasing their ability to buy bread or milk the same. They don't get more because they're making a higher salary and less because they just got here and they're making a lower salary. In that way, it's fair. There are some drawbacks to it, but in that way, it's fair for people, I've thought for a long time. So wherever we end up.
Where's that F word?
is fine.
Well, no, I mean, so one of the drawbacks from an employee standpoint, and I'll put on my hat as, a former employee that sat on a step and grade. If I'm the younger employee that plans on staying here for 15 to 20 years, I want that higher employee to get that higher one, because I know in a couple of years, if they got that bigger jump, I'm going to be walking into that bigger pay raise. So it's okay if they got a little more than me now. They've put in 15 more years than me. But I know in 10 or 15 years, my rate has gone up quite considerably more than just capped at a smaller one in order to keep everything even or fair. So there's both sides of it.
Absolutely.
I'll just add on, maybe on the not flat side of it, is it does, you mentioned, like, spread the table more, right? Your grades become further apart as you do percent, because the lower numbers grow less, the bigger numbers grow more. But there is maybe something to be said for that, where it creates more differentiation to, if someone moves up and takes a promotion, there's more of a noticeable change, right? That I've stepped up. And I know there's been some conversation 3 years ago that if you were high enough in the step in the grade below and you moved up into 1 or 2, you'd be losing money because they overlap, right? There's not enough percentage points and enough steps there that or less steps there that they don't overlap. They overlap. Your highest paid in the lower grade, I think in almost all cases, overlaps the earlier steps in the higher grade. So, and experience, value, time, all that, there's all reasons for it, but that is where having percentages starts to pull that apart a little bit, whether that's good or not. So, relative opinion.
Yeah, it's all relative.
It's all relative.
The thought that it's not apples and oranges, it's fruit salad applies to this discussion as well as the other one, truly does. And I have respect for whatever opinion people have. And you've often heard the rich get rich and the poor get poorer. In this case, it's like the rich get richer and the poor don't, sort of. But there's a variety of ways of looking at it, and I respect each opinion that there is, and where we end up, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is,
that 3%, though it's spread differently, the low will not be getting as much as the high, steps and grades, is about the same cost as a $1 flat.
correct.
It's about, in terms of budget, budget impact.
Yeah.
Obviously not in employee impact.
Correct, on budget impact, which means those that, just by nature of math, those on the lower end of the steps would be getting under $1, and those above would be getting more. So
On a percentage.
On a percentage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's just historically the way it works. But that idea was thrown out there just so we could have it as one more wrinkle to talk about when we're coming to our final discussion.
Add a little more variety.
And so in none of the discussions I've had has anybody thrown out 0 as a number, right? We've obviously earmarked some money. And it was a stab in the dark. I think originally a few meetings ago I said 50. The last meeting was that might be a little low. Let's move it up to 60. I'm not sure that's enough to, for what we need to do. So just for those listening, those here, nobody has thrown out, we can't afford COLAs. It's a matter of how do we make this work? How do we still balance the budget and try and do the best thing we can for our employees with what we have to work with? So, I don't know if you need anything else on the wage. I don't,
No, I appreciate you working on it, number one, and providing the background and the feedback on, how
Yeah.
we got to where we are. It's a significant amount of work.
yep.
There's no perfect option, right? And that's the challenge we have.
So just something to think about. I actually lean towards trying to have our structure of our wage and step model more of what the school has with the 3%. And I think from an employee standpoint, that makes more sense, because if we decide on 2% this year, or 2% next year, or 3% this year, and 3%, whatever we decide, those are 1 year at a time. If we make that unilateral change to increase the steps, that's a 15-year change. That's a rolling change, forever change, that you're guaranteeing that automatic, right now, everybody, as long as they're not maxed out, and I think we only have one employee that is maxed out in the town. We have one that is going to be maxed out next year. Everybody else has several years before they hit the 15th step. So you're guaranteed right now a 2% adjustment for your step. If we were to say, change that this year, if we can work one of those percentages into the steps, you're guaranteeing a 3% step every year for the next however many years until you max out. And then we can look at what's left over, what does that cost, and do we have enough to then add additional COLA on top of that, which we will, because 1%, whether you put it on a step or you put it on a COLA, for that one fiscal year, it'll still be the same amount.
1% is
1% is 1%, whether it's put onto a COLA adjustment or a step adjustment, either way.
Right.
One has long-term effects, one has an annual effect. Or
One-time shift.
one-time shift that
The
is
other one's an
guaranteed to
annual
go
shift,
forever.
basically,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's a guaranteed 1% more every year
Year over year.
versus a 1 year 1%.
Right. And so if things, and the reason I say I'm an advocate for that is if things change, if the landscape financially changes over the years and we built in more capacity to do better COLAs, you're guaranteeing a step of 3 or 2.5 or whatever we can come up with, as opposed to 2 plus whatever we can add on for a COLA. So it just, the guaranteed money is there rather than the debating about it every year. In case you didn't have enough in the umbrella of compensation to discuss.
Enough in the bowl.
There's a couple
Yeah,
of hands
one
up.
more scenario.
If there's no other question or comment yet, Chief, if you want to come up. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Scott, thank you for your work on it. And you threw a lot of numbers out.
Yes.
And I'm here, obviously, as a department head, but I fall under a much different, unique situation where I have a bargaining unit underneath me. So I'm not here to advocate for them in any way. So I don't want to come across as advocating for them. But I know I will be asked. You had started off with the ground rules and that this wasn't going to take effect for bargaining units. Was that a step or was that the COLA? Because I wasn't part of conversations, but I've been led to believe by my staff that they're anticipating getting something, whether that was conveyed to them or wasn't conveyed to them, whether they took that and twisted, I don't know. So I just want to be able to answer the
Maybe.
questions.
I'll just clarify because I made the statement.
Okay, okay, sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Maybe.
No, go ahead.
Scott did too when I stepped out. The collective bargaining agreements are adjust. Any changes there are done at the collective bargaining table.
Okay.
So this discussion about what applies does not apply to collective bargaining agreements.
Okay.
It is. I was silent on whether there would be any negotiation with them after any decision here.
Okay.
that's something that we would take up, not in this forum. So,
Okay.
I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just saying it's not it's not for this conversation.
Okay.
And
Okay.
what may or may not change there.
So I will,
Okay.
You know what we did last year. Everybody knows.
Right,
We
right.
applied it everywhere last year.
Right.
That's all
I just
can
want to be
say.
prepared for the questions because I'm sure they're going to come. So.
Understood. I
So,
even Adam.
there is a process. It's my intention, and I can't speak for the other two members or anybody from the finance committee, but it's my intention that to utilize the same method that we used last time with respect to the NEPBA. That would be I would advocate for that, but we would have to do that at the table. We couldn't, if we came up at this meeting or next meeting with a COLA, we can't just arbitrarily apply it without at least offering to engage in that same conversation.
That's much clearer.
yeah.
Much clearer.
Because it goes both ways, maybe, because this is just how I look at it. Not having been in one, you can't give, nor can you take without bargaining.
Sure.
Right.
So even if we wanted to, assuming, and I'm not saying we do or don't.
Right, right, no.
We couldn't without sitting at the table and having that conversation. So that's where any of that will happen. It
Yep.
just won't be here.
No, that's fair. That's much
true
clearer.
for
That's
a
much
contract
clearer.
employee. That's
Yeah.
true for
Yep.
collective bargaining.
Yep. And again, I'm not here
Yeah.
on their behalf.
understand.
I'm here
It's a-
because I'm going to get asked the question.
It's a great clarifying question.
And I appreciate that clarifies it. Can I just make one more
I
statement?
think Scott.
Well, I was
wasn't
just
done.
going to say, and so I'm sure people in the audience are going to listen on this and have questions from water and wastewater as well. The difference
exact
being one is if we engage in that, to make an offer or ask if there is a willingness to accept a reopener per se for wages from any PBA, we can do that. Water and wastewater, in the steps that they're in, it has to be part of a full negotiation package. It can't just be a arbitrary, we're going to make these changes as of July 1, unless we have a contract ratified. But it has to be a whole contract. So for those listening that are concerned about water, wastewater, that process has to play out a little bit more in depth before we could make any sort of discussion on a base wage.
Yep.
So they're not two in the same. One is a fully established, ratified. One is not.
Right.
So.
And you definitely clarified, both of you clarified, so I appreciate that. Can I just make another statement? Obviously, as the department head, again, I'm not here advocating. I don't want to come across as advocating for them. But obviously, I have a stake in the game is to retain employees. And I would just ask that, part of the wage study is that, the 15 steps just seems high to me to have 15 steps. We're bringing somebody in at such a low step, whereas, I had made a recommendation, and so I want to make the recommendation publicly, is like maybe step 1 through 4 would be the reserve steps, and then step 4, which would be step 1 to whatever, just lower the 15-step process to max out. It seems long and you have trouble when you hire somebody at step, our step 1 is 2244, and they're saying, well, in 15 years I'll be here, that they look at that and they're like, wow, that's a long time to get there. So I would just make that as a recommendation for you guys, from the department head trying to retain people. It's hard to retain people. Yeah, I see that as being a struggle, and usually we lose people. You haven't lost me, you haven't lost Adam, you didn't lose Chris Blair. We were here, we were long time, employees. But the people we are losing, they come for a couple of years and then they're gone. And it seems like maybe if they weren't so low, looking at such a daunting process to get to step 15, maybe that would be helpful. I don't know, but.
Yep.
I don't recall, and I don't remember, I don't know if anyone who was here 3 years ago does, but I believe in the work with the Collins Center on this, going from 7 or 10 or 15 was extending the guaranteed increases. It wasn't starting higher, right? So taking them off when that first was offered or discussed, if I recall, was that just means we'd bring down where you're guaranteed to get to. And so you get to 7 and be where 7 is, and there's no guarantee of what a COLA or any adjustments after you max out. So this was letting you not max out as early. I think that was the premise back then. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think that was the premise. So taking steps away actually was, I would have perceived it as a negative. 'Cause
I guess
it wasn't the front steps. I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
though.
I just want to caution, so I'll take what you're giving as information that we could utilize when we discuss all town employees.
Right.
But however, the NEPBA has an active contract,
I
and we
know.
really can't make
I know.
any of those sweeping changes until their next contract discussion. We
Yep.
just don't have that authority.
Yep,
And-
no, I
and,
understand that.
You know, Chairman Smith just said, we cannot, that's the whole reason of a contract, is we cannot go in and make changes, and nor can they come back and make changes towards the town. So we have to, we
And I
have
know
to
that
honor
they're,
it.
and I know that they're listening, so maybe they will take my advice too. You know, so,
Yeah.
no, I appreciate that. Thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
That is helpful, so.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. There was a lot in the fruit salad.
There is.
Just to bring it back around, welcome more discussion. I know we aren't going to resolve it tonight. I don't expect us to. Not looking for us to. I would like to reflect on whether the 60 is the right number as one thing with everyone, or if there's any other questions or clarifications that anyone's looking for.
I mean, ideally,
No.
I'd love to see the number be higher, given that we still haven't been able to balance the budget. I'm not sure we can, I can advocate to increase the 60 from where it stands.
Right. I know we haven't always been here, and I know you've referenced, the differences maybe in some of the schools' bargain structure versus our grade and step, and, there's just historically been a lot more than just a 1% step difference in what has been done.
Yeah.
And that is, I think it's been difficult for the employees, and I understand why. And I'm not saying that that's the way it will be going forward, but just something that is in my mind about how do we make adjustments and try to, treat everyone as equally as we can, within reason. And of course, it's in a year where we don't have
Yeah.
a lot of capacity, which
Well,
is unfortunate.
One of the things I'd like to make some changes to it. There's more discussion that I talked about. We want to look at, the entire compensation package. I look at it over, say, the next 2.5 years, of what can we do for FY24, what can we do for FY25, and how can we, systematically get there. We're not in a financial spot to say, let's earmark, $300,000 and put it on this line item. We're not there. But can we systematically, over the next couple of years, be very diligent about how we utilize our funds and where can we place them within the budget that we have through R&A, not, so that we can try and minimize some of the shift from one town employee to another town employee where the delta is so great, from one department to another,
Right,
from
right.
one system to another. So try and even that out a little bit.
I just say, I agree with Scott. If there are more funds available in a sustainable manner, not just throwing free cash at it, if there are more funds available in a sustainable manner, I'd like to see the 60 be 80 or 100. And in sensitivity to the taxpayer who paying the bills, most taxpayers have been an employee. And when they're an employee, when they're on that side of the coin, they work hard all year long, and they don't expect to get nothing, or 1%, or way less than the price of milk and butter went up. They expect to kind of keep up. So, and it's tough too, because nobody likes to pay more taxes than you have to pay. But I would like to treat our employees the way all the taxpayers who have been employees would like to be treated themselves. It's a different way for them to look at it, other than just, my taxes went up. So,
Right.
Yeah, we're not going to come to a.
Yeah.
We don't have all the
that's where we are.
information in order to finalize it. We really need to see what comes out of Wednesday's meeting and where we're at and how we're balancing it and whether or not we have capacity.
Right.
So,
Anything else anyone would like to have for next Monday? If we haven't, but you don't have so far to digest.
Yeah, my only ask is for anybody that has this information that is going to be part of the conversation next Monday, if you have ideas on percentage amount versus flat rate amount versus step increase, increasing the gap of steps, any combination of those, put all those together so we can have a thoughtful conversation on what is the best method to go forward. That gives us a week to really sort of hone that in so that we can have a deep conversation on Monday and come to an agreement. We're going to have to move forward with it no matter what on Monday to balance it.
The only other one that I would add is just if there's an interest or a need to have, we have an idea what each percentage costs, right? We have an idea of what a dollar costs. Do we need to get projections on what a percent change in step or a percent change in grade will cost?
A percent change in step would be it'd be the same for.
It wouldn't though, right? Because step 1 to step 3 is, to step 2 is 3. Right now it's 2. Step 2 to 3 is 3. Right now it's 2. So now you've just moved 4 to 6. It's actually an escalator. It's not linear or semi-linear.
You're right.
So it is an escalator, and based on where the different steps are, just like the percentage, it mattered. If you change the step percentages or the grade percentages, that plays out across.
I wouldn't begin to try and do that on the fly right now.
No. I meant, do we want to have that for next
Yes.
time? Because we don't have
Yes.
it tonight.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Both one in each direction, both in grade and in step, or just in step?
well, we have the one. So grade, no, I'm not. Some of our grade jumps are they don't. You're talking two different types of positions to try and. Not every department has equilateral a grade 1, 2, 3, 4. That makes sense. Sometimes you go from a 1 to a 3
I see what
to
you're
a
saying.
5. Those are the only positions available. So you see bigger jumps as it stands now, and they're not unilateral.
But they are on the general table. They are, and I believe if it's skipped, it's just two grades.
Yeah.
But so they could be played out. But I'm not saying we should or
Yeah.
shouldn't. Those are only 2, I believe, percent as well.
Yeah.
2 or 2.5. So
If people want to talk about it, I was
I'm
looking
just
more
asking.
for the steps
okay,
myself.
okay, we can do that. We'll do the step then.
Yeah.
And if there's a grade discussion, it can always be part of the more whole long term,
Yeah.
the next year work.
Well, so I would look at a shift in grade like that. To me, is a larger change to the table as the full compensation package. And if you want us to have more of a conversation of that related to are the jumps from grade to grade, are they meaningful and are they worthwhile and are they in line with competitors in the area as part of the wage study?
Right.
If you want us to continue to look at that, we can add that into the fold a little bit further. We did discuss it, and we felt that it was unnecessary to move forward with that.
Okay. It's too soon to say for me.
Yeah.
I would say if we significantly change the step, like a percentage point or more, because of where that 15 might land now, the grades may not feel that way anymore, may need to be reevaluated,
Correct.
and or having 15 steps may need to be evaluated. Because I think when we see that cascaded change out 15 steps, it may be larger than we think.
Mm-hmm.
I'd need to visualize it and actually see it, not just try to visualize it.
Yeah.
So we'll do this. We'll get the step data for next meeting. Anything else for next meeting on that? Okay. Back to the overall budget. Any comments, thoughts, anything else on the 85 and or changes before next week? All right. Review of the annual town meeting warrant.
I don't have any changes to the ATM. I know everything that is highlighted right now is simply just left blank and highlighted in yellow, representing that we have not figured out wages. But language-wise, I didn't have any concerns with it. I'll give it another final read just to make sure I haven't read the same thing 5 times and missed the same typo, but I'll, looking
Oh, right,
looking
right,
for
right,
those
for
type of changes.
grammatical.
But yeah,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
for content-wise, I don't have any other concerns.
So I have a request from the chair of the trustee of the library for a change to Article 15. Their line item originally was a request for $3,000, and that request is to be requesting a change to $10,000 for that Article 15. That came from the chair of the Board of Trustees of the library.
And that's just increasing the cap on the revolving account
Yes.
spend limit?
That's correct. And I have no concerns.
Could I ask you a follow-up question as a trustee?
As long as you don't have a conflict, if it's not financial for me or for the.
Yeah, no, it's, are you finding that the spending is being, the 3,000 is not sufficient and you're finding yourself hitting a ceiling where you have to not do certain things? Or is it just you trying to build in more capacity to be able to not have that glass ceiling of that revolving account? I mean, it doesn't cost the town anything. It's just
Right,
a matter
right.
of
It's just a limit.
paperwork and limits.
The trustees had discussed it as a board and voted to ask this. And it was more of it was never really explained why we were different to begin with. And we do have some additional things where people are approaching of a policy for out-of-town people who need to use our space or want to. There's a fee schedule. It's not a lot of money, like $25 or something, but we anticipate that creating more use of the library, and I'd like to have those funds stay with the library and just be comparable to other departments.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns with it. I was just curious if there was something that was happening that was, the 3,000 was stopping you, the ability to function.
Not
But
yet.
like I said, it doesn't really change, it doesn't change the budget at all. It just gives capacity.
Same amount.
I don't have any
No
concerns.
concerns.
So we'll have Brian make that change.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
I have that noted. Anything from capital or finance on these?
One question on Article 19. It says it's the fourth of 5 planned deposits.
In regard to the library, I thought this was.
This next year is the 5th. Is that, am I correct?
Technically, it's the 4th, and the 5th has been partially paid for with the balance of the solar appropriation that was moved last fiscal year, or earlier this fiscal year. From that account into stabilization. I want to say it was 165, 150 something, 160 something. Don't have the number right in front of me, but that moved a bulk of the final 273 payment, if you will. And the lead certification is an additional 100.
So
Once
between
that's
the,
complete, so in theory, we would put an article on to move the lead money into stabilization. And between the two of those, it would make the final payment, or within 10,000, one way or the
yeah,
other. I
within
don't
a
know
couple
which way, but
thousand,
it would be
we
very close.
would make whole the original
Self-borrowing.
withdrawal, self-funding from capital, or from stabilization, I mean.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
As I'm scrolling through this, I'm realizing that just as a note, and maybe you said this, but the wage data does not include any change to elected official compensation who are stipended. So any of that, and that was something that I think we fixed when we did this 3 years ago and said we would revisit in 3 years, and it was not, it had no escalator, it was just fixed. So if that's something that needs to get reviewed and make any changes to, that's not, also not incorporated in that table.
I recommend that there's no changes
To the stipended
to the stipend
compensation.
positions, yes.
I believe we have generally deferred to the finance committee for a recommendation on those in the past. Being,
I will shift my recommendation
being one
to
of
the
the
finance
recipients
committee.
of it, just to keep it cleaner.
That's why I said it, you know, that would be my recommendation as somebody who gets a stipend, that we not increase the stipend.
Understood.
I'm sorry, Scott, I couldn't hear what you said.
I was saying, my recommendation would be that we do not increase the stipends. As somebody who receives a stipend, I don't want to see my stipend increased.
Well, if you're looking for a recommendation from the Finance Committee, I would move that the Finance Committee recommend the elected officials do not get an increase in their stipends.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And there was a time when people came in and they were interested in being on some committee or board or something, they said, which one pays the most? We all started laughing at them. So if somebody's in it for the money, they're in the wrong place.
Yes, sir.
Article 18. It says raise and appropriate 150,000. Then you go down to the article information, it says raise and appropriate 10,000.
Sounds like a typo.
Yep, those are the typos we're talking about. We can read this 10 times and we'll keep catching those, so
I'll highlight that one for
thank you.
edit, yep.
You know what? I don't know, and this will be a question for Brian. In Article 19, going back to that one, do we need to call out, it says we're just appropriating it, we're not raising it, but we are, on our breakdown, we're raising appropriating 150 and 100 and whatever is free cash to make that 273. So I'm wondering, do we need to call out in the article information that some is raise and appropriate and some is appropriate through free cash?
Yes. Yes.
So we just need to clean that up a little bit, because we had that discussion about
Yes.
changing the RNA
Yes.
from 273. We dropped it down to 150 and moved 123 to from free cash. So the total's still 273, but how we got there is
And that's
different.
what the by is. That's highlighted. That's what his reference is. It's meaning by raising and appropriating X amount and transferring X amount from free cash. So that's what that little highlight of by.
Oh, okay.
That's going to be the method
He's
that
gonna
we
put
need
that
to
on
fill
there.
in.
Got
we
it.
need to fill in the split when
Yeah.
we have it.
Yeah.
That's what the by.
That's what the
means.
highlight is
Yeah,
there.
Yeah, that's his. That'll tell him what needs to get filled in.
Got it.
When we decide.
So currently it's 150 and 123.
Correct. It's
Okay.
just not drafted with the number yet.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's where the split will go. Okay. Any others?
We had this discussion last week, but on the opioid fund, when do we know how much that's going to be exactly?
The
So I can tell you some figures. Currently, there's been 3 settlements. So it comes over a length of, I think, 15 or 16 years, and they come in smaller incremental amounts. There's still ongoing cases through the AG's office that's settling these cases nationally, and we're part of that class action. So as those get settled, what those settlement amounts are will be broken down and given back to the town, all the various constituents that are part of it. The dollar amount is yet to be determined, and it's all based on a formula. It's based on the number of prescriptions that were written to residents of the town within that time frame of when the lawsuit, these findings are for. So it's really, there's no way to determine what that number is. You have to wait for the judgments. Currently, I think we have a few $1,000s in 9,000. I don't know if that number is correct or not. It might be high.
I feel like it sounds low.
I think it's, you have
I
that
don't know what the
number,
is,
Chief?
I don't have the number, but for some reason, 400,000 stuck out.
But broken, yeah, so
Broken, right.
over like 16 years, so we get a portion every year, and that's what the establishment of that account will be, so,
And the rest are not settled?
correct.
So there's multiple, I think there's 8? Or
Yeah,
8
3 have been
different
settled, there's more still to go.
pharmaceuticals, so, or groups. And so as those get settled at what the rate is per prescription, and then I think I've also heard there's some that are trying to negotiate to do a upfront or a shorter term and pay it off.
Rather
to
than
not
do like a
carry a
16,
15-year
yeah.
liability, they just
Yeah.
don't want that, or
Yeah.
whatever the reason.
Yep.
So,
Well,
very in flux.
I bring it up because I think, I recall that we had a conversation where I think it was discussed that those funds would be turned over to the Board of Health to make a decision on how they would be best to determine how those funds would be used.
So,
But then reading articles in the newspaper where some concern of communities and cities and towns using it for other resources, as well as buying cruises. A number of different things were discussed on how those funds could be used, or
so
may be used.
there are very specific guidelines on how that money can be used, and I'm the one that makes the recommendation that it goes through the Board of Health for how to use those. And the Board of Health, I spoke with the members at their last meeting, and their plan was to do outreach to any and all departments that would have input on how to best use those. And they threw out ideas of fire chief, police chief, library director, the superintendent of schools, so the senior center director. So all of these people that may have in some way, shape, or form direct contact or direct need for some of those funds. The funds have to be utilized in some way, shape, or form to address the opioid concern. So that has to be direct services to patients, direct services to family members, direct training related to that. There's a ton of in-service related to training and how to work with co-occurring. So somebody with mental health disorder and and drug use disorder. So that's why the Board of Health, it really falls under their purview, I think, to coordinate with all these other departments and say, here's the money that we have in so far. Here's what we expect to have coming in over the years. Do you have programming or direct service needs that you're highlighting that we can take under advisement and work together to fund those? So if anybody's using that for buying, capital expenditure stuff that's not related to opioid, that's on them to deal with, but Town of Erving won't do that.
Well, and the bylaw language, I think, or not the bylaw, sorry, the capital stabilization article language, or opioid stabilization language there talks about the allowable use pursuant to those restrictions. And it does start with all allowed by law, but then it specifies clearly the ones that are outlined in a linked document there from the state about strategies, as well as following with, consistent with any state and guidelines and regulations on the allowable use of those specific funds. So I think we've tried to make it as open for the purpose, but restricted to the purpose in that language to ensure that it's being used solely for that purpose.
Okay.
At least, pretty confident this board has no interest in any other method. I don't think anyone else does either for those funds. Others? Questions, comments? On the ATM?
I just noticed that Brian had put a little sticky note on one of these, the meeting minutes,
Yes.
questioning the title. Is that the correct title for the bylaw? Just titled meeting minutes. I'm going to meet with him sometime later this week anyways about some other things I can ask him. I don't really care one way or the other, as long as it captures what, I don't have a thought one way or the other. I just wanted to highlight the fact that he did question that and whether or not we want to keep it the same.
I think, yeah. Probably partly us, and we could partly look and see if someone has a better,
Yeah.
a more clear title than that, but
It would just be a title change. It wouldn't change any content.
exactly. Exactly. Any further?
Just want to make sure people check the changes for things like the winter and snow emergency parking ban, which is part of this draft. There's some changes into that.
From our last discussion.
Yeah, from our last discussion, and they're all highlighted. Specifically like section 5, the notice, there's about how we notice and where we post for snow emergencies and for parking bans.
Does it make sense to come back to those after the joint meeting if there's any questions?
Yeah, that's fine.
Just to-
Yeah.
Just
Yep.
for the sake of their time, if you all don't mind.
I don't mind at all.
Okay. So if there's nothing else on the ATM, then it's the IP mill discussion. This may have been one or more, I'm not sure what the number comes from, but there's a notice I have here from earlier this year of 108,000 over the period of years for opioid money, by the way.
Oh, okay.
And that may have just been one settlement. Oh, I'm sorry. It is for 5 of the settlements. It's 108 over that period. So maybe you're right. It's only 9 for this year.
Yeah, I was
so
gonna say
far.
it's not.
So we wanted to come back and go through the different scenarios and come to a recommendation on the scenario for the public session around the IP mill and decisions about whether or not to put that out on the annual town meeting or in a June meeting, sorry, June special, and how we might come about that money. So I meant to take down refer to my notes on what we had discussed last time we planned for this meeting. I believe it was what would a debt exclusion look like for 3 and 5 years borrowing, and then what a capital exclusion, I believe it was called, which is a one-time, and then what a was there another one? Oh, what half from stabilization? If we did half from stabilization on the borrowing, or not in those terms. I think because we talked about taking half from stabilization and borrowing the rest. Oh, or a portion, but I think the numbers we were looking for was a half at the time. We since have obviously gotten some updated estimates for demo, which have gone up, which are in that data there in front of you. And we have some data which I would call on you, Jackie, if you would come up and just explain a little bit. We have it both shifted and unshifted, unless,
Do you have them too? You got, okay.
okay, thank you. Unless people would like to do it differently, my recommendation will just talk through either flat rate or fully shifted, just because we normally fully shift. And that's a board decision at the end of the day on what we do, but just to give that context for everyone, I'd just say we talk about shifted for now. We'll have both scenarios,
Sure.
if that works.
Excuse me, I don't understand what you mean by shifted. What
So-
are we shifting?
So when we do our tax rate, we shift. We do the MRF shift to put more of the burden on the commercial industrial
Okay.
and less on the open space residential. And the third one that I can never remember, personal property,
Well,
is in the shifted.
yes, so
the higher
CIP
burden,
is
right? Yeah,
shifted,
P, there we go.
and residential and open space is,
As a reduced rate.
right, it's
in
the
effect.
reduced rate, yes.
So if we do a debt exclusion or a capital exclusion, we can, it will follow whatever shift we do for the regular tax rate. And I think as long as I've sat up here, we've done the max shift, which is 65%.
65, yeah.
So we have all the different scenarios we usually look at when we do the tax rate shift for these data points. And my recommendation is just for discussion here, and which makes sense, that we just use the fully shifted, the 65% shift, because that's traditionally what people are used to seeing in their taxes today. So I think from a meaningful standpoint, it's all good, don't get me wrong, but it's maybe more of an apples to apples from what people are used to today and what that will mean if we do this. So we have 4 concepts, but the fourth one's not in this pile.
Yeah, it says 2, 3, and 4.
I have the other one. I can send it to you.
I
I'll
have-
forward it to you guys.
I have them all if,
That's okay.
Okay.
I'm not quite clear on exactly what they are showing
Which one
us.
is
So
which?
well,
if you would, yeah, we'll just start with number 1, which obviously
okay,
we
so
don't have, but-
concept number 1 correlates with your concept in your, is it Ty and Bond that gave you the report?
Yes.
So they had said 1.3 million would be the cost. I'm not familiar, like, beyond what I read, what the concept is, but for concept 1, it was,
Okay.
so they said it would be a $1.3 million cost. So if we were to do that, it would be an additional $1.33 at a single rate above a cost for the tax rate. So, and at the 65% shift, it would be 86 cents for residential and open space, and $141, I'm sorry, 141 for commercial, industrial, and personal property. Now, so basically, the average, and this is based off the fiscal '23 values. That's important because the values for '24 are going to go up. They just are. So I did everything based off of what the current values are. So the single family house value, the average in Erving is $223,950 for the average value. So the single rate tax impact on residential would be $296.91, in addition to what their regular tax bill would be. I cannot calculate it accurately on the CIP side because it's just too many variables in it. If you were to do the 65% shift, the tax impact on residential would be $192.99 above what they would pay for their average tax bill. Is there any questions?
And so just to,
Yep,
well, maybe
okay.
just to talk through what that is. So that is the first scenario, the concept 1 in the printed documents that you guys have from Ty and Bond, which I am under the recollection that we primarily all said we want to do the last one, save building 8. So we probably really just should jump to 4, but that's what that number represents. And for an average, almost $224,000 current year valued house, the impact shifted is just under $200. And that would mean that total 1.3 million is debt excluded for that 1 year. It's a one-time tax impact, then it's done. If it was only 1.3, which is not where I think we are. So I'm guessing if you all agree, we want to jump to scenario 4,
Yes.
which is, Jackie, just to confirm, it's 4.4. But it doesn't take out the money we have for the grant, right?
Right, and my understanding concept 4 was full demo and no saving building 8?
They didn't give us a Save Building 8. We just don't have
Okay.
one and we don't want to pay
Right, so
extra for it.
we can only
so-
run the numbers on what they gave us, so just know that if there's a small savings for leaving 8, then these numbers would actually come down. So we just have to sort of
Right, so-
estimate what that would be.
I know concept 3 was saving building 2 and building 8.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Correct.
Right.
These,
And-
this, what Ty and Bond did was what we originally did in 1971. They just followed that whole format all the way through, disregarding that we had meetings where we actually said that we were doing phase 4, and leaving building 8 out.
The assessment of it?
Well, weren't they gonna be doing
Or-
some testing to see whether or not it is hazardous?
So two things. One, I want to say, I don't have the numbers, but I can look them up. There, I think we have them in our packet here. I think it was like 6 or 8,000.
695.
Yeah, that's more than about doubled now. So now it's 12 or 13 with the latest updated numbers, just for the testing. Either way, I think the board and maybe the whole group made a decision a month or two ago to hold off on that assessment until we determine if we're going to do this, because we would just be throwing money at it. If we're not doing this, then that may not necessarily add any value, so why spend the money until we're sure? It's supposed to only bring the number down if it doesn't have. So it should hopefully be worst case. Yes.
If I'm looking at this right, concept 3 is a little over $1 million less, $1.1 million less than to demolish everything. If we leave building 2 and 8, including repairs to building 2, it says, that's 3.2 million. But if you just tear everything down, it's 4.3. Which, was the thought to tear everything down? Is that
Yes.
what the decision was, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because then we have building 8, and if we had to go back and tear that down later, I mean building 2, sorry, then that cost will be more than the $1 million difference in theory.
Okay. Okay, so we're looking at 4.345 million. So if
Yeah,
we-
I rounded
agree
it
with
up
you,
to
though.
4.4.
Okay,
I agree with you, though. It doesn't make sense to me. It costs $1 million more to just demo and not repair. So I don't like the numbers. I think they're way too high, but it's what we have.
4.4, that includes the 600, or?
No, it does not include the
So you can bring
600.
it down to 3.8 then?
Correct, but we don't have a 3/8 scenario. I think there was some, between what we had asked for in the last meeting when we did it and what got communicated and provided, I don't think that got connected, so.
Well,
It was provided against the tie-in bond numbers, not against what we had talked about.
we can do the math in
We
our
can-
head.
we can get
Concept
close,
3
yeah.
has 3.2, concept 4 has 4.4, smack dab in the middle of that is 3.8. So if you want to take whatever the difference was and find the delta in the middle. So we know what that shift would be. We know what that change would be. It's right in the middle of those two.
With the shift, I don't know if it's quite exactly that,
It's
but it's
close.
close. It's close
close.
enough for tonight.
For conversation about how we move forward, it's close enough.
Absolutely. So,
Concept 4?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so concept 4, which was 4.4 million, and if you want to have the new numbers with the 3 I can have that for your next meeting. So if we were to do a single tax rate, it would be $4.49 per thousand of value with the single rate, and with the 65% shift, it would be $2.92 per thousand of value and $4.79 for a CIP. So for an average single-family home, it would be an additional $1,004.91 above their tax bill. That's the average.
for a flat tax rate, which we don't do.
No, that's not
currently.
for a flat. Yes, for the flat, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
that
that's
is for the flat. For the 65%, it would be $653.19. And that's an average house of $223,950. So if your home's valued less, it would be less. If your home's valued more, it would be more.
And that's a capital exclusion, I believe is the right terminology.
Yes, it's capital exclusion, it's a one,
Versus a
it can only
debt.
be one time. It's still considered a Prop 2.5 override process, but it doesn't add to the levy. It would be one time only.
So it's the paper vote and the town meeting vote?
Correct. And then a one-time additional tax for that 1 year, and then it's gone.
Can I ask, have the numbers been run, if we were to do, whether it's a combination borrowing, self-borrowing, whatever it is, how much the total would be over X number of years that people would pay? So a lot of this is kind of confusing, even to people who deal with it all the time. But for people who don't deal with it all the time, to me, just saying, look, would you rather pay $653 once for a year and it's done? Or we can spread this out over a number of years and you might pay $3,000 or whatever it might be, considering all the interest and stuff. Which would you rather do?
Right.
I don't know that second number or how you find it.
We don't have it tonight.
Okay.
I know we talked about it last
Okay.
time, we do not have it. To what the debt carrying cost and all of that, you know, what that's gonna be. It's not linear, obviously, because of interest rate, so, if we did a debt exclusion, and I took advantage of the fact that you sent these in Excel, thank you. So, 3.8 million, which is the number here, is, and, I won't take any credit or responsibility, no, for the accuracy. No, it's, if we did shift it, that's $564.12 for the average household. So that was the scenario I think that we were thinking is the one. Hopefully
Okay.
slightly less without building 8. Hopefully less because this seems too expensive. But 565, say rounded up on your average $224,000 home
Okay.
on a shifted tax rate on this year's values. If we spread that over a 3-year debt exclusion instead and a borrowing from, you know, through a bond or something, or loan, with interest and everything, I mean, it's easily 600 and something, you know, total by the end of it, I'm sure. By the time you pay interest, you know, I don't have the numbers, but it's gonna be more than 200 a year for each homeowner, instead of 565 once. I mean, it just has to be more than 2. I don't think it's gonna be more than 3, but it's gotta be more than 2.
Right, I think it would be fair to say that, you know, even if it was 225, so 675, it would, you know,
Easily,
you'd
yeah,
see an
probably.
additional, you know, 100 over a 3-year period.
Right, a 5-year, you know, you might string that out to, I don't know, say 150 a year for 5 years, but, you know, then you're paying 750.
Right.
Or, yeah, it's gonna escalate, however we spread that out.
However long we hold that debt, it'll just cost us more in the long run, so.
Yeah.
We can get those scenarios we'll have them for the public session, and we might have them before for us to look at too.
Yeah, I'd certainly suggest that, at least for the public session, it'd be good for us because had to make a recommendation without it from a financial point of view, but certainly for the public session, I mean, I think anybody has the capability to understand all this stuff if they happen to want to. My guess is they won't happen to want to read, you know, 23 pages of all kinds of stuff that's confusing. Could read if they want, bring in all the stuff if they want it, but spelling it out, just, you know, here's what it would be if we just do a debt exclusion, here's what you pay once, here's what you pay over 5 years each time, and the total.
If we were to spread it
the
out
total
with a
difference.
loan.
So it's just very easy to understand, and I say that because I like things that are easy to understand.
I think
Thank
the
you.
consensus was that we want to present up to 5 scenarios very clearly. It's a one-time 565 average for the average value house. If you want to pay for that over 3, it's this, over 5, it's that. If we want to fund half of it out of stabilization, that changes these to these 3 other numbers, so I guess it's 6, right?
Yeah.
Two per option, in theory. I think the other thing, unless there's questions about the numbers, would be how do we get to, what's the proposed stabilization draw? How much do we want to calculate in for that? And are we assuming we'd pay that back as well, so then incorporating how we get there? Wouldn't be in it wouldn't be in a debt exclusion, but it would be in
Right, so
our own payback out of monies that we have annually, rather than appropriate or free cash.
One of my concerns is we have to be very careful if we're talking about how much we're gonna pull out and how much we're gonna repay, if we haven't really looked at what the budget can sustain. Currently, we have, 150,000 that we're, RNA to pay back what should be the last payment for the library. And so, thinking about if we were just roll that over, how much do you want to pull out of general stabilization with the caveat that currently we have an earmark for a repayment plan at around 150 out of RNA. It could be years that we can add more to it through free cash, but, the bigger that number grows for how much we're pulling out, you could be talking many, many years of tying up a dollar amount on the town side, so.
Well, and the burden to the taxpayer is going to shift with the valuation shifts, so it's not always going to be that same amount when you tell the voters that it's going to be this amount. It will not be the same amount each year. It will vary depending on values and how much the tax rate, how much the values are versus how much you're raising and appropriating. So it's not, I don't want taxpayers to think it's going to only be a certain amount of money each year, because it's not going to be that. It's going to vary.
Yeah, we can give projections for estimates.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
these are estimated, they're not gonna be perfect, they're not on next year's values, there's, not on the raised tax
There's-
rate, there's all
right.
these pieces, but.
I just don't want taxpayers to get the impression that it's going to be,
No, I think we could
Yeah.
give them an approximate range and feel comfortable that, and know that it'll escalate. If you drag this out over a 7-year period, expect that the payments that, are gonna be made in years 5, 6, and 7 will be higher. You're going to pay more.
But regardless of what the tax rate does, the amount of the debt exclusion
Yes.
and the amount of dollars that we need for that don't change.
right.
Right.
So as a percentage, as your tax rate, yeah, but if it's $200 each year, it's $200 each year, right? It doesn't matter what the tax rate did.
Right, no.
It may go up or down based on the spread and valuation shifts.
Okay.
But the tax rate change won't actually impact the debt exclusion amount. This is why it's not simple, but the general concept is, right? It'd be around $200 every year for the average 225 house, or whatever that number is,
Right.
we can give that level of.
I mean, we could do it, I could make projections for every $100,000 in value, which might be easier for people to understand if their house is currently valued at $200,000, or if their house is valued at $130,000, or if their house is valued at $500,000. I mean, we have that range of valuations in town, anywhere from $125,000 up to, I think we might have a house around the $600,000 or $700,000 range.
Yeah, but we have the individual tax rate too, so. and
We
can
do, I
give
know,
that
but
and it
if
can be
people were saying, well, what
calculated.
does that do, like, to my house is, my house isn't the average, or I have a more expensive piece of property, that sort of thing, that's a bigger impact for them. That's the thing to
Right.
keep in mind. I just did
I
the,
just meant like times 1,000.
Yeah, yes, I know what- yeah,
Anybody
I-
can,
yeah.
we can give them that formula
Right.
too, that it'll be around this.
right. It is based on the per thousand.
So Jackie, this is based on 23 evaluations.
Yes,
Will this change?
yes.
So by the time we go to vote, we'll be under 24 evaluations?
No, I haven't started that analysis yet. I won't even start it
So
until
this is all
July.
based on 23 for the vote?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
But the amount of dollars
Right.
doesn't change.
Right.
We need 3.8, it's gonna be spread across the base. The difference in how much, out of the 565 will go up or down a little bit based on if the ratio values shift. Like if, your house goes up more than mine goes up, not the same percentage, then you'll get $1 more, I'll get $1 less, whatever, right? But the general overall spread will be somewhere in the 550 to 575 for a $225,000 home, somewhere like that. So and that's gonna be how we're gonna have to, the article's gonna be, we can do a debt exclusion for 3.8 million, and however that lands on the tax bill is how it lands if it's approved. the general guidance will be, this is how you have an idea what that means to each person when we vote on it.
Yeah.
The thing to keep in mind is, when we do the shift, residential and open space paid about 10.5% of the tax burden on a dollar, and the CIP pays the rest. Commercial, industrial, and personal property. So it is conceivable if we have a big increase in our commercial, industrial, personal property, then, that, those numbers might change for the good for the residential, maybe not so much for the CIP, but because we're so heavy in the CIP level, it's a lower impact for the residents, higher impact for everyone, the CIPs.
When you say 10.5%, that's shifted?
Yes, that's shifted. That's the, under 65, you see the 10.41, I just
We have
rounded it up.
10.39 and .02.
Oh, yeah, it's the last number in that
Yeah,
box, thank
yeah.
you.
No.
Okay, got it.
Jackie, you had mentioned, just for one more point of reference, the 100,000 per 100,000.
Correct.
Because I did it because, I took advantage of the
The rate's right
the
there.
formulas that you have in there. But yeah, if you could just shift that down and say per 100, it comes out to $251. The average home is this.
Yeah, however you-
So you can
right.
see both. So if people are looking at that, we have the information that per 100,000, it's $251. If you can put 100 in instead of the 223.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Just see what the per 100 is. Just so somebody, because everybody knows approximately, what their home value is, what they're being assessed on.
Yeah. We can give them the formula. pretty
No,
easily.
no, but we can give them the formula, or I was just thinking, the person sitting in the audience that might have the question, they don't want to do the math, they just want to know approximately how much is it going to affect them. You could just do the 100,000 and.
That's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
if the person in the audience says, I know my home's worth 500,000, it's 5 times whatever
Yes,
that dollar is,
exactly,
you know.
and that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
do have a wide range of home values in
Right.
Irving, so, yeah.
Any questions on that? Right.
We just want to be clear of what we're,
That piece
what we're bringing back for the public
for the
hearing.
public session, yeah.
The public session, we're bringing back the
We need-
revised numbers for the 3.8.
We need a 3.8,
Yeah,
and then if there's a stabilization number, we need the difference.
right. So it
You
would,
know, if it's half of that, then we need a 1.9.
I would think it should be half of that. I mean, anything that we can do to reduce the taxpayer's burden and lessen that, I think we are obligated to at least present that.
So you're thinking the taxpayer's burden would be the 1.9?
Yeah.
Either the full amount, 3.8, or 1.5, which would be 1.9, right? So I think those would be the two.
1.9, okay.
Yep.
Because concept 2 was 2.3 million, so.
1.9, it shifts it on the 65% down to 282.06.
Yeah.
I love,
We're taking advantage of
We're
your
taking
formulas.
All
advantage.
right,
fact that
I
you sent
didn't
the form-
protect my worksheet, but
You
that's all
sent,
right.
you sent
no,
us the,
don't,
I did.
we
it's
won't,
close
yeah,
enough for
we-
this
yeah.
discussion tonight. And that is, I think it
Shifted.
actually is exactly half.
It is,
Yeah,
yeah.
it is that linear, so.
So you want the 1.9 and you want per 100,000, for the cost. for the-
1.9 per 100 and 3.8.
And then the average, okay?
Yeah.
And I think that does it for this. Then it'll be a question of what does, if we get the debt cost, right? The overall cost over 3 and 5 years, I mean, to plug that in and then divide by 3-ish to get us to what the annual cost will be? Or
Yeah.
5, I mean, so it's gonna be a little bit of those scenarios as well. But
Right.
we can work with the treasurer and you to get those and put
Right.
those
what
together
they-
as
what
well.
The average, yeah, what it would be for, on a yearly basis, I think we can narrow it down a little.
I think we'll have 6, right?
Right.
We'll have 2 debt exclusions, one with the full amount, one with half.
Yeah,
And then we'll have, 2 capital exclusions, one at full and one at half. And then we'll have 4 debt exclusions, 3 and 5 years of the full amount and 3 and 5 years of half. Right?
yes.
Is that the scenarios that we're talking through?
As far as I can follow, yes.
Yes, we do.
If you did the 3 or 5, and somebody wanted to do the 1, could they do the 1?
No, it's the whole
It has to
town.
be-
all
It's
or
the whole
nothing.
town, all or
The whole
nothing.
town, okay.
Yep. So, I think initially the discussion was, do we go in with a recommendation to that meeting with the public of what scenario we think is the best, but to leave that with a gauge on the interest to doing it, and then which of the 6 is the most favorable to the group, to inform what an article will be.
I think that's how you should proceed. I mean, as a taxpayer and a resident of the town, I respect the fact that you've picked something out, but I also want to know what your criteria was.
Right.
So,
Right. So, I mean, that's, that, at this moment, beyond information, I mean, that's what I think we're bringing.
yeah.
And we can have the detailed stuff, but what we'll put together for the presentation will be concise, right? It'll be,
Yeah.
here's the total amount. Here's if we take half out of stabilization. Here's what that rate will be shifted. Here's what that means to the average, to 100, and the formula to calculate it. If we do it all at once, if we borrow for 3 or we borrow for 5. And it'll be a matrix, but it won't be huge, right? Hopefully be easy to follow, and we talk everybody through it. And
Yep.
Now, I do have the ability, if you would, from the commercial side, if you have, if you're worried about some local taxpayers that might worry about what the burden is on them, we can actually calculate what that would be approximately too. I would just need for you to identify who you might, and I wouldn't name names, but I would just say properties type thing. We could do that.
did you say this CIP rate on here would not necessarily be accurate?
No, the CIP rate would be accurate, but their
Okay.
valuation is, that's what the key is, like, what is their valuation?
But they would know that, just like residential in theory, so they could get it.
They
to
could
figure
get
that
it,
out.
or we do have some large taxpayers that have a mix of residential and commercial, that it might
More
not be
complicated,
easy.
yeah,
It's a
okay.
little more complicated.
Understood.
So I just want, I can anticipate that scenario at your meeting, so I can do that. I have done that in the past for other
So
things.
I think predominantly the people that are going to come and discuss this are going to be residential. I would suggest having it, and if some of those property owners are there that have concerns with, that fall under the CIP, that we have that information for them and discuss it with them.
Are you joining us? Are you planning to join us?
Or
on
give
that
it-
Yes,
meeting?
I've already, no,
Okay.
yeah, it's the 24th, right?
24th,
Correct.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
be there.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
So yeah,
Can we
if
rely
you're
on you if that
comfortable,
happens
Yep.
to help
Yeah,
us?
no,
with
I'll
that?
do
Okay.
up the various scenarios
Yeah.
of the taxpayers in town that might anticipate that question, and I can have the information available.
right, so if they want to know
Right.
what this impact, if we were to
Right.
go with this one, what the impact would be
Right.
on their commercial rate.
Or their mixed use. I
Their
mean,
mixed
that's
use,
really,
yeah.
it's not so much the commercial one, it's the mixed use where they
It
might
gets a little-
own some
yeah,
commercial
yeah.
property, they might
Gets a
own
little
some
dicey,
residential.
yeah.
It gets a little confusing
Yeah.
and hard to do on the fly, so I
Yeah,
can do
And
that.
we don't have a ton of those.
No, 5,
Yeah,
maybe 6.
I was gonna say.
It's not a huge amount.
It's not a huge amount.
So if we can
I
have
could-
those, just in
I
case
could
there's-
tease it out, and I
Yeah.
could have it individually.
That'd be
if the
great.
question came out.
Thank you, Jackie.
Okay?
Thank you, appreciate it.
And you'll send me the notes of what we talked about, what you want for the 24th,
We-
right? Because
I
I
will-
forgot to
we
bring
will
up a pen.
send- Yeah, no, I will send something tomorrow or Wednesday to you and Brian and Jennifer for what we're looking to put together. At least close, it doesn't need to be perfect, it's close. Anything else on that one? Are we good with where we're headed in terms of what we're bringing to the public?
I'm good.
No, I think we're good. If we have those 6 scenarios, I think that's something that we can have a good discussion.
Would you also address how much, what we're taking from stabilization, how you would suggest the amount that we would put back in? Or,
I think to Scott's point, the only thing that I can think of, if you all have ideas, great, please share. The only way to pay back the 1.9 that we could sustainably do right now would be the 150,000 that we're raising and appropriating to pay the last payment on the lot. Well, what should be the last payment on the library in the coming years. So that would be paying it back at 150,000 a year. I don't know of any other not guaranteed, but likely dependable recurring way to pay it any faster. That's a pretty long payback.
It's about a 13-year
That's a
payback
long
to get
payback.
back there, unless we have a windfall of, some other funding source that comes in that we can apply to it. You'd be looking at a 13-year repayment for that, as opposed to 5 that we did for the library.
Well, if you can pay
effectively
your house
4
off
at the end of it.
13 years, that's pretty good, so.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but that 150 was talked about as a way to take I think it was a 10 or 15 to do one bridge
Right.
and sustainably pay that. So if we do this, that took away the only debt service money we had to potentially fund a bridge or a large project. And really, the bridge wasn't large in compared to some of the building
Yeah.
projects and other things that are out there on the
So,
docket.
I mean, we'll have the discussion on the 24th.
I think one of them is that we clearly say the plan is not to pay it back. That could be the proposal. I think that needs to be part of what we put forward, but maybe the proposal is that if we draw that, we don't pay it back.
Yeah.
Because tying that as our debt service for 13 years, I don't think I feel comfortable projecting we're going to be able to do that and not have something else that needs that more. And anything can be changed, but I don't want to just set the premise that we've tied that money up. I think that feels too far out with the budgeting we've had this year. Maybe next year it'll feel different, but when we did it for the library, I mean, we weren't talking about being concerned about getting to zero because we were so far negative. We had capacity every year to do a few more things,
Right.
Raise and appropriate, let alone our free cash. So.
Yeah.
Sounds like we're good on that one.
I think that's everything.
What's that? That looks to be it. Next Monday, 7 o'clock. Is Capital rejoining us? Rejoining. Are you joining on Monday as well or not?
What's the subject?
Well, finalize the ATM, finalize the budget.
Again?
I mean, I don't perceive
Any
us
capital.
deciding to get rid of any capital. It would just be a shift potentially on whether or not it's funded from free cash or from raise and appropriate if we needed to balance, and that's where we chose to do it. I don't think there would be any other changes. The only possibility is if we had scenarios to discuss for IP, but I don't want to put that burden on everyone to try to turn them around in a couple days, unless it's really important. Other than that, no, it's setting the budget and setting the ATM and approving it.
Yep.
Which, you're welcome to join, but I don't think so,
I don't
unless you
foresee
want to
it,
be
no.
here. You got the night off.
Take a Monday off.
We're entertaining. You can still watch from afar. The FinCom good for Monday,
Yeah, make a motion.
7 o'clock? Okay.
Make a motion, guys.
What would you like us to move? If the school was present.
Pardon me?
Put the request out
Yes.
as much as we can do.
Yeah.
He was asking if the school was present
School
next week.
needs to be present.
We will make sure they're clear, they're invited and requested.
Make a motion?
You have no
dissolve.
further business? Oh, no, we're going to come back.
We're going to
to-
come back.
Yeah.
The joint meeting?
Was that
Motion
a
to adjourn
motion?
the joint meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you all. We're going to finish up ours. We got one left.
And
then we'll go to
back to
executive.
the,
We're going to go back to the annual town meeting
yes,
to the bylaw section.
yes, thank
And
you.
discuss any of the changes and draft form there and any concerns with them. Which started at Article 21. 21 was the bylaw editorial changes from the town clerk,
Yeah,
or by the town clerk. No changes there. I believe we had no concerns last time.
no, I did not have any.
Okay. Cable Advisory Committee. Article language was added. But that is the extent of the changes so far. Any, no concerns there?
No.
The personnel bylaw, and this we had said we were going to come back to and just make sure there was no further edits from last time we tabled it till now. Anything in there that anyone has?
Nope.
I know you
Nope.
spent many hours on it. Appreciate that. Bill, anything in the personnel bylaw section?
I don't,
Okay.
I thoroughly reviewed it before we came here, and nothing jumped out at me at all.
Okay. The meeting minutes, the title was called out, which we can revisit next meeting if there's any recommendations for a change there, but not, there was language change there, which is not highlighted, but it was the content we discussed last time.
For which one again?
For the meeting minutes,
Yes.
we had discussed changing, there was the penalty section, which we removed.
We removed in total.
And then the modification to the filing, to change it from, to remove the section about a
Section
board or
9.
committee holding it themselves.
Right.
It makes no judgment on that. It just says they must be filed with the town clerk as the official copy. No concerns with that language?
Nope.
Nope, good.
And the winner no? New sections?
They had the new section for the notification.
Yep.
Glenn, can I ask you a question?
40 if you'd like.
You have to come up here, though.
It's a very quick
That's
one.
your penalty for saying yes.
No, it's a very quick question, and I don't think we even have to change this because this is the minimum that, this bylaw is the minimum that we would do.
In terms of
like-
informing.
Informing.
Yep, section 5.
Do you know, I just noticed it the other day, I didn't realize Montague had one of these where they have the blue flashing lights when they have a snow emergency to indicate the no parking ban. Do you know anything about how they operate those? Has anybody from?
I don't, I've never seen them because
I
I'm
never
usually
saw 'em
over here
before.
working when it's going on.
Yeah, I saw one out on Avenue A in front of the, Route 2, 2nd Street by the Country Creamy. There was a sign and there was the blue light, and I don't know, I'm
That
just
might be
curious.
controlled through their dispatch center.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if they're tied in or if they're, how those are operated, but
I'm not, but I can reach out to the
yeah,
superintendent.
it'd be interesting to
out.
find out, because, this is the bare minimum that we would do, but I've seen more communities using those, so that if you're not tied on the reverse 911, if you don't have access to that, if you don't, whatever, you're just Joe Schmo that's parked down on Avenue A or parked on one of our roads in town, and you see the blue light and be like, oh, I gotta move.
Okay. Yeah, I'll reach out to
I
the
thought-
Montague
you
superintendent
know,
and find out.
If
how
it's something that's
activated.
simple, I don't want to go old school where you had to drive around and push the button yourself to activate it, but
You just nick it with the plow. No.
no, if there's something in, that could be tied into your office where, you're heading in to turn it on and there you go. They got a blue light flashing in various areas to notify people.
Yeah, I can look into it, reach out.
Would you also just inquire on where they have them? I'm wondering if it's only like in the downtown district in Montague?
I would assume it's just down there.
In Curtis
Yeah.
Falls.
And I'm not
downtown?
sure where it would apply for us. I just thought it was interesting. If it's
yeah.
if it's a a minimal cost to do. You know, obviously, if it's some huge infrastructure, you know, to do, I would say no.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I can do that. I'll get that information for
yeah,
you.
thanks.
You're welcome.
As far as the bylaw, no. I think we leave that as a minimum. I don't want to add anything else in. But it just, the other day I saw it and I didn't realize our
I haven't
neighboring
seen
town-
it yet. I know it's there. I don't
I
think I've
haven't
seen
either.
it going off, I guess
Yeah.
I should say.
No, typically during a storm, I'm not driving down Avenue A to see them go off.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's none left on the shelf.
Yeah, there's none there. They got there the day before.
Bill, anything on that
Yeah,
one?
I would only, looking at section 5 of the, section 5 of the notice, how we're going to do that, complete that, that we do put something either in the newspaper or on the news.
For the
Local
start and
news.
finish dates? For the start and finish dates of it?
Yeah, yeah.
You mean like twice a year, like when it comes into effect and when
Yep,
it leaves? Or
yep.
you mean just when we implement the first time?
Well, I mean, I hear radio stations do it throughout the winter season. If there's a emergency snow ban in effect, you know, they broadcast it on the local news and
On the emergency
radio
ones,
stations.
yes, but
Yeah,
what about
so-
the seasonal, like the start and finish? That's what you're saying, you'd like to see advertised like in the paper?
Yeah,
on
I
the
think,
news?
I think it should be advertised. I mean, we're notifying only local residents and people just who happen to pass through, if they pass through those areas. And not everybody's going to see it. I mean, but people do listen to the news and they do hear it. So, I mean, at least you give them more forewarning than what's available here. And it doesn't cost us anything to do it. I mean,
Well,
Uh,
there is a cost.
yeah, there is a cost.
well, there's a cost to put it in the newspaper, but it doesn't cost us anything to call up the radio station and say, there's a snow ban on this date or that date.
I don't think the emergency ones may not, but if we just wanted to do it as an
If you
annual
just wanna
notice, it'll be like
advertise.
taking out an ad, I'm sure.
Hmm.
If we're doing like an annual notice, but are you suggesting that that be part of the bylaw or additional practice?
I'm suggesting it be part of the bylaw under section 5.
I'm not opposed to the idea of doing it, I'm just not sure I love the idea of it being more than best effort, right? Like it's mandatory and ensuring that it happens. Maybe because I don't listen to radio as much anymore.
Yeah.
Nor read the newspaper, and I know how much those ads keep going up every year because we've had the discussion about recruiting where I work and that the return on that because it doesn't get the level of readership that it used to. I'm not saying it won't reach anyone. I just don't know if it's. Anyway, you
So
wanted to add-
my suggestion would be, I agree with Jake, is bylaws should be the bare minimum or the widest scope of what you can do. I think if you get into the minutia of all of the nuanced things you want to have happen, as those change over time, we don't have the ability to go in easily and modify. We have to go back to an annual town meeting to update the bylaw because HAI isn't doing that anymore, you know, or the local news station doesn't offer that. So our bylaws are out of date. I think if we have local things that we want to do above and beyond this, we have the ability with our board to create policies and say, this is what we expect, and it conforms to the bylaw. It's within the bylaw. It can go above and beyond. So you can have additional scope of requirements that exceed the requirements of the bylaw, but at a minimum, the bylaw does this. And as a board, we say, yes, but currently we have these other options available to us, so we'd like this and this to happen too. And that could be something we could do at our level. And then when those change, if they're no longer meeting the need or they're not, you know, they become obsolete, we can modify policy very easily in this office rather than having to go to a town meeting to change the local news notification. or if we no longer have a local newspaper, you know. It can happen, you know.
It can.
It can happen. Which local newspaper? Are we talking the Montague Reporter? Are we talking the Greenfield Recorder? Which one? There's two local right there. Owned by the
Apple
Hampshire
Daily.
Gazette. Are we putting it in that one? So I mean, to put that into a bylaw, I think it's too much. It's too constrictive.
The only thing I was going to add to that is just that we I lost that thought twice now, and there it went a third time.
So
Anything-
we have the two
go ahead,
message
Glenn.
boards also, that we could put one on each end
yeah,
of
there we
town
go.
for like the first 2 weeks of November.
Yeah, at the beginning of the season
Yeah,
and
at
the
the
end
beginning, yeah. Like first 2 weeks of November, we could put one on each end of town, kind of where they're placed now. And then put them away after we get done picking leaves up, and put them away for the winter storage also.
Oh, you leave them up for the whole year that way, unless you
No.
needed them somewhere else?
No,
You
just
mean-
for a few
You just
weeks.
mean for those 2 weeks?
Yeah,
on
for the
either
2
end?
weeks
Yeah.
while we're doing leaf pickup.
I think that's a
And
good
then
idea,
after
too.
we get done, we
We'll add
put
that
them
to your new
away.
policy.
No, that works, but I just, you know, I don't think we're really forewarning the public, we're just forewarning us.
Well, there'd
Essentially.
be signage.
Right. So
If
this
you drive into
policy.
town, I mean,
this
if you're an
policy-
out-of-towner and you drive into town and you don't see the sign, you're probably not listening to the local radio station either, because you're not
Yeah.
from here. So I don't know,
I mean,
that helps
so
our residents,
I was just
but
gonna
I
say-
could mail
say the
our
same
residents
thing.
the first time and let them know the change, right? I
Right.
don't know. That's me.
Our bylaw, I think, is informing our residents of what our policies and our bylaw dictate for our town. The signage that's part of this is those people that are just driving through, they see them. I see them when I come across into Montague. I see the signs that tell me from this date to this date, I can't park on the street from this hour to this hour. I see them. They're there. I don't live in those towns, but I still see them. I think that's enough. I mean, there's some onus on the people to be informed, like to see the signs that are in front of them, and to, you know, we don't have to spoon feed every piece of information to them. I think sometimes we're almost dumbing it down so much that just let them be responsible to see the sign and read it when they come in. We're putting it at every entrance point on the major arteries coming through into town. I think that would be enough.
And hopefully whoever you're visiting, if you're going to be parking at their house overnight, will tell you, hey, we have a ban, put your car in the driveway for the night, or I
Bans
don't
are
like
pretty-
you, you're going to get towed, or you're going to stay here. I'm not really sure how that's going to go, but what my comment was going to be that I lost there for a second was just, I think about it like the annual town meeting posting, the meeting posting requirement, right? We have a bylaw that says these are the formal posting locations. We put the message out there in 5 or 6 places, and we mail everything home. So in terms of notifications, we've done 5 times what the bylaw requirement is, right? And I think that's just a matter of practice and policy versus in writing. So. Sorry, I think you're maybe outvoted.
You are.
Informally.
If you want to put it to a formal vote,
No, no, unless you try, right, Bill?
Suggestion, man.
yeah.
No, I appreciate it. It's a good cover. We should put it in a policy. I absolutely agree. We should do everything we can reasonably. Anything else for Glenn
No.
on this one? Thank you, sir.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Are the hands
I
still
don't know who is
necessary?
first to come take that seat, but there was 2 or 3 hands, so.
Your front row don't count.
Yeah, front row. That was,
And you
that
said
was
you
the-
weren't going to put your hand up because you didn't want to walk up there.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
I had this question in my head last meeting too, and I didn't bring it up then. But I'm trying to understand why the town of Erving needs an emergency parking ban for snow at all. Like, I don't understand in what's, maybe for one parking lot in the center of town? Like,
This is roadside. This is on any road.
but
We currently
We
have
have street park, people park in the street 24/7 in
Yes.
the town on certain streets in certain places. And when they're plowing, they're going around them or they create hazards, or
okay.
I can
Yeah, so
attest
that-
to driving
if
around
it wasn't
them
an
and-
issue, it wouldn't have been brought up. So the
Okay.
issue is they're
Yeah.
plowing around standing vehicles that people just do not move them during storms. They'll just
Okay.
leave them there. And it-
On the public roadway,
On
not
public
parking
roadways.
lots specifically.
Okay.
Maybe that happens too, but this is more focused around the fact that roadways were
Yeah.
the issue.
Must be on this end of town,
Not,
because
I
I
was going
don't
to
see
say
it.
that, it's
so-
not on our side
I was
of
gonna say,
town.
I don't
I
see it on
disagree
our
with you,
side.
Bill.
On
I
this side
disagree
of
with you,
town.
sir.
Okay,
I drive
that's
by
all.
some of those cars, I can tell you.
I can tell you it's in all 3 villages.
Thank you.
I've never seen
Yeah,
it.
it's prevalent
I
enough that
drive
we
by
wanted
it
to
regularly,
address it.
Bill. Can tell you,
Never seen it.
being on the same village as you. Jackie, did you still have something or no?
I was,
Thank you.
to Bill's concern about the publication, I don't know what the bylaw says, but you could say, we'll notify if it's for the residents, if we're doing it on the website and we're doing it usually like we do printed matter, you put it in the around town. I mean, there's plenty of notification for the residents, which is really what the bylaw is about. So if they park their car after we notify them, then shame on them because they just didn't pay attention to everything that we do about it.
It's signage at every public roadway entry point, every municipal entry point. So all those roadways that would get you into town, which we see in our neighboring communities. And the second notice section is on a snow emergency, we post it on the town website and use the reverse 911. So the annual announcements will be in the around towns and on the
Right, and
websites
then-
and in all of the normal methods. Plus, we could do radio and we could do these other things. We'll have a list of things that we're going to do every cycle, but those are the 3 technically, I guess, in the bylaw.
I would say that I have noticed more and more people checking on our website for various things and checking to think, when things are posted or actually looking at the around town. So I think they're getting back into that habit of checking those things, so they are being notified.
At the end of the day, we're going to reach those who want to be reachable. I have to say, like, some will get it word of mouth from their neighbors too. It happens. Anything else on the snow bylaw?
No.
Anything else on the ATM? I think that was it for bylaws.
That was the last
Good?
one.
Okay.
That's the last article.
Jim, did you have your hand up on the snow one or no?
I was
didn't-
just gonna ask, because I agree with doing whatever is reasonable and prudent and going above and beyond. My question was, if we were to, as Bill recommended, if we do specify certain elements and we fail to satisfy those elements, what are the consequences and to whom?
I would presume, not being a lawyer and not vetting it that way, that it would give someone the case if they were a victim of, per se, the bylaw and had a vehicle towed or fines or whatever, that they could argue those couldn't hold up. Because we failed to do the notification required, so they can't be held liable for failure to comply. That's what I would expect. My presumption. Which probably sounds familiar from your law enforcement background. I think it's the same idea, right? If you can point out where something wasn't done according to the way it was supposed to be, then you don't have to be accountable for failure to follow it.
That's a whole different conversation.
We don't have time for that one.
Not this evening.
I think that's where you were going with the.
Yeah.
Some point you need to be responsible for.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on this tonight? Anything else on the agenda beyond executive? Other than, sorry.
No.
Okay. With that, I move the board goes into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel regarding the fire chief and the chief of police. We will not return to regular session. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor is a roll call vote. Scott Bastrach?
Aye.
William Bembry?
Aye.
Jacob Smith? Aye. Thank you all. We will move into executive
What's
at
Sure.
9:25. We will break between. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.